Gracias por estar aquí tan puntuals. Hello, good morning. Thank you for being so punctual. As you know, and we've told you, this is the inaugural session of the doctoral program offered by the Department of Translation and Linguistic Sciences. We have a very special situation, as we all know, with the pandemic, so that today we are in this room complying with all the requirements that we've been given by the health authorities, but some people are not with us. So this session is going to be offered in streaming, and this is why there is a lot of technical compliances that we need to follow, okay? In principle, we're all going to be operating very near the screen so that the PowerPoints that you're going to be seeing are visible. Yeah? But let's just start before the presentations from the 10, although you will hear one group is not with us. Unfortunately, this is why we changed the starting time. The 9 research groups in the department are going to be explaining to you their activities. We want to give you a few words, opening words, and I am very pleased to introduce you to the head of department. Some of you know her very well, but she has been so kind to be with us today, albeit it requires efforts to give you some opening words and a welcome from the department. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. PérezVidal. Okay. Benvinguts, gràcies per ser aquí, els que sou a Barcelona. And welcome also those who are watching us from every corner of the world. My name is Anna Espunya. I'm the head of the department. And I'm also a professor here. The role of the department is to foster a research environment through basically 3 elements. One is providing infrastructure. The second is providing financial aid for meaningful research activities. And the third is allocating human resources, such as administrative resources and also advisory resources. PhD students are very important to us. You come with fresh ideas, with fresh research questions requiring methodological answers. And that is a source of, new blood to us and constant, keeping up to date. Among the academic advisory resources that we allocate are our program coordinator, Dr. PérezVidal, and also the figure of an academic advisor. We call them Tutor, and today with us is Dr. Mercè Lorente. As a head of department, I want to stress out that we are a small university, a public university in Catalonia, which means that we have to do a lot with very little. And I'm very proud of what we have achieved through our doctoral program, which has been running now for, almost since the department was first designated, 1996. So I wish you a very productive stay with us. And I hope that this will be the beginning of a very, let's say, satisfying research career for you guys. And I hope that, maybe in the future we can see you back with us doing research in a more, let's say, mature or professional way. But meanwhile, my office is 309 in building 52. I'm the person who's responsible for how things go in the department. If you ever need to come and see me, please make an appointment. Okay, and I'll now give the floor to Dr. PérezVidal. Okay, thank you.
Okay. So here is me, it's my turn, and then you will hear Dr. Lorente, and then we will start with the presentations. I would like to welcome Dr. Quer, who is going to be the first presenter with the GLIF group. Thank you very much for joining us today. Now, we've met already, we've talked, some of you know me personally, having been students here. But what we've talked during the tutorials was fairly practical. We wanted to give you an overview of what you are supposed to do when being on a doctoral program. However, for now, I was thinking, you know, what could be most useful that I haven't been able to tell you yet? And here is where I came up with a decalogue. So 10 ideas relates to abilities that I think we on the program would like you to have at the end of the program, and we will definitely help you develop while you're on the program. Okay, so 10. I haven't prepared the PowerPoint because you're going to see fantastic PowerPoints through the presentations that will start after our sort of opening words. But let me give them to you, and perhaps you want to write them. So 10 ideas. And I group them into 3 groups. So there are ideas or abilities, okay? Strategic, scientific, academic, 3 items in each of them, and then one final 10th general ability, which I think is key. Well, I think, we all think, those who have been in research for a while, right? Now, strategic abilities. It is very good to have a sense of purpose, to be practical, academically speaking, in a way. And third, to be very good with paperwork and know that the best way to deal with paperwork is meet deadlines. So let me explain a little bit each of them. So it is very good to have a sense of purpose. You are here and you know why, otherwise you wouldn't be here. But let me put it this way. Sometimes the first idea, the initial idea to join a doctoral program needs to be modeled and needs to be sort of clarified, more on focus, let's put it like that. For some people this may not be the case, but for many it may be the case. So try and at any moment be very clear why you're here, why you're conducting a PhD, okay? And sense of practicality, be practical also. Be very realistic. That reason for doing a PhD, try and see how practical it is, and maybe you adapt your purpose to what you see that is happening in the world, because you will learn a lot about the world, and that will be my 10th ability, okay? So sense of purpose, be practical, and then definitely your life will be much easier, and our life, and in particular the Secretary's Office life, if any little bureaucratic step that you need to take at different stages during these 3 years, you are very good at meeting the deadlines. I know you've done it with your registration these days. You had 5 days and you've done it. But believe me, there is a handful of people who haven't registered. Can you imagine? And they haven't said anything. And we don't know what happens with them. And then the Secretary of Office spends hours trying to contact them. Because we will, in spite of you not meeting deadlines, always help you, right? And there are people who don't meet deadlines. But if you meet them, it will be so much easier for everybody, and you will feel under much less stress. So that's the third element there in strategic abilities. Let me get on with the scientific abilities, perhaps the most academic ones in a way. Okay, when you conduct a PhD, you're expected to be original and innovative in the topic you choose. Very obvious. You're not expected to do something that has already been done, of course. But this you must bear in mind. So it's got to be original and innovative. And when I say innovative, I link it to the third element, to the third feature here, For that, you want to use technologies. Because these days, whatever you do, even if you do literature, things that may seem to be a little bit far away from technology, just go and see what technological developments can do for you, or what you can do for technological developments, whether what you're researching has anything to do with any advance in technology, right? So the third one here in this group would be make sure that what you're going to be doing makes a contribution to society and makes the world a better world. Now, these are very grand words. In more technical terms, one could say, try and make your research applied. Applied means that you can transfer the knowledge you obtain through all you do over these 3 or 4 years to societal needs. And whatever you do, literature, computational linguistics, formal linguistics, that can be done. And this is what will get you more in tune with possibilities for a future professional career that uses your PhD, okay? So the practicality of it, okay? So I finished with the second group. I covered strategic abilities, scientific abilities. Now, I don't know how to call these, but academic. Let me be more like down to the ground. So you need to be very good, let's put it like at the 4 skills when we use language. First of all, you need to be good at listening. And when I'm saying listening, I mean go around and listen to anything you can. And that I link, remember when we told you you're expected to follow activities, to attend seminars, to see anything that is available, in particular at our university, but not only, other universities in Catalonia, any seminar conducted worldwide that can be accessed through streaming, do that and listen to what people tell you, not only in your area, in other areas. Okay, you need to be good at reading, of course. Before you start, you embark on your own theme, you need to know, I mean, this is also very grand, but I would say everything that has been done before, yes, in a way, yeah? So you need to know that then you're doing something, remember, original. So you need to know what has been done before. And of course, your PhD is going to be written, so you need to be good at writing, yeah? And that we are going to help you develop, definitely, not only writing the final text, whether as a conventional thesis or as a compilation of different research articles, but you're going to be asked to do posters. Remember, you're going to have a poster session in next year. You need to write abstracts if you want to apply for conferences to present your research. So writing is going to be a fundamental ability, or skill rather, because it boils down to a language skill, that you need to develop while you're here. Not only in English, of course, I'm using English because some of our students come from very far away and may not be competent at Spanish, but we encourage you to write theses in other languages. There's no problem, Spanish, Catalan, and you're most welcome. And there are enormous opportunities if you write theses in Catalan, and special prizes and special grants, in a sense. So, I mean, you can approach your tutor and she knows everything about it, because her field of expertise is through Catalan, okay? So I've covered the 9 features, the strategic, the scientific, the academic, and then the 10th one that stands on its own, but opens enormous windows of opportunities, network. This is all about networking, because through networking, you reach and people reach to you. You reach out and people reach out to you. And networking starts here, so you're going to have the entire morning to talk to each other here. You learn a lot. You're going to have professors explaining their research, their stuff, and they're going to stick around for coffee breaks and talk to them, ask questions during the sessions. Don't shut away during your doctoral program. And there you have the other fundamental skill, which is communication strategies, oral communication strategies, that you definitely need to develop while you're on a PhD program, because you are expected to reach out. There's no use in doing your little study in your own little room, just talking to your supervisor. This is no longer the way we conduct research, and this is why we've asked you to feel part of your research group, the research group where your supervisor works, and this is why today we offer these presentations, for you to know who's there, for you to also think that you can talk to other experts in the department besides your own supervisor or supervisors. This is absolutely common practice. Of course, discuss that with your supervisor, but say, look, there's this professor who does something in pragmatics, and this may help me. Can I just ask to go by his or her office and have a talk to this person, saying that, you know, we discuss it with you, your supervisor. But do that. Take advantage of everything this department offers you. Okay? So these are my decalogue. I hope it's useful. It's in a sense practical, but with a vision. And let me just finish with an idea that was put forward on a seminar held by the head of the doctoral school at this university, where she invited different enterprises in Barcelona to talk to us about how they thought that PhDs should be useful for enterprises and businesses, not only for academia. We don't want inbreeding research. As I said, we want research that helps society and makes this world a better world. And you know what this head of the enterprise said? Something so simple. I know it's someone from outside academia, but this person said, look, whenever I have someone working for me who has a PhD, what I know is that instead of sometimes generating problems, they always solve problems. They are used to solve problems. Technical problems, social problems, human problems. They know that life is about solving problems, not generating problems. And I would like to finish with this. Thank you very much, and we hope to help you do all these things with us while you're here. Okay? And let me hand the floor over to Mercè.
Hola, buenos días a todos. Buenos días o buenas noches a los que nos están viendo desde el streaming. Ahora, muy rápidamente, voy a anunciaros lo que ya tenéis por escrito. En la carpeta encontraréis el programa que ya os mandamos actualizado, donde veréis que se presentan todos los grupos del departamento. Lamentablemente hay un grupo, el grupo LLENGUATGE, de Language Acquisition, que no podrá estar hoy aquí por problemas de horarios y de calendario. Tenían unas tesis. Y empezaremos con el grupo de lingüística formal, que es un grupo grande, con bastantes personas, que nos presentará el doctor Quer. Después haremos una pausa. En esta pausa breve, simplemente para estirar las piernas, abrir las ventanas, estar lo más cómodos posibles. A continuación presentará el grupo de prosodia la profesora Prieto, que vendrá un poco más tarde. A continuación, una persona del grupo que sustituirá a la doctora Boleda presentará el grupo COL, que es un grupo de lingüística computacional. Ella está enferma hoy y precisamente por esto la sustituirán. Y entonces haremos la pausa más larga. La pausa más larga, tenéis en la carpeta una hoja de color amarillo, que es un ticket para ir a la cafetería. Y por tanto podéis sustituir este ticket por la consumición, que como os pone aquí, tenéis una bebida o un pequeño bocado para poder mantenernos bien toda la mañana. Este desayuno nos lo ofrece Espunya, la directora del departamento, para todos los que estamos aquí. Lamentablemente, los que estáis en streaming no podrá ser, nos acompañáis con vuestro café. A continuación presentaremos dos grupos más, el grupo IULATERM, que lo haré yo misma, Y a continuación el grupo Infolex de lexicografía, que lo presentará el doctor Tourné. Haremos otra pausa y luego vendrá el grupo de recepción literaria, de recepción de la traducción. Y a continuación el grupo GEDIT, que es el grupo de discurso y traducción, que también es un grupo muy numeroso. A continuación haremos otra breve pausa para ventilar la sala y a continuación vendrá el doctor Cassany para presentar el grupo de enseñanza y aprendizaje de lenguas. Y por último, el profesor Hinzen presentará su grupo de gramática y cognición. Y luego al final haremos un poco el cierre de la sesión. Bueno, simplemente para que veáis cómo nos organizamos, veréis a lo largo de las presentaciones que hay grupos más grandes, grupos más pequeños, pero todos tienen unas líneas muy definidas. Las líneas siempre se tocan, es decir, que en realidad las fronteras no son nunca claras. Hay grupos que trabajan en tecnología desde el léxico, es decir, la tecnología ahora en estos momentos está presente en muchos de los grupos. Pero no solo esto, es importante que veáis que tenemos grupos que se dedican a la lingüística teórica, lingüística formal, etcétera, y luego tenemos grupos muy aplicados que se dedican no solo al desarrollo teórico y metodológico, sino también a realizar aplicaciones concretas que se van a la industria o a otras instituciones. Es importante que visualicéis un poco el panorama. El programa de doctorado no quiere que solo os quedéis en vuestro grupo, en vuestra línea, en vuestro proyecto, sino que tengáis también una visión amplia de las conexiones que hay entre todas las líneas de investigación para el futuro. ¿De acuerdo? Pues nada, que tengáis muy buena jornada y creo que ya vamos con tiempo ya vamos un poco tarde incluso para empezar. Y le doy la palabra al doctor Quer. Bienvenidos a todos.
Okay, thank you. Good morning, everyone. My name is Quer, and I'm the coordinator of one of the groups that will be presented today. That is the Brutal Linguistica Formal Linguistics group. And it's a bit of a challenge to explain what we do and who we are in 10 minutes, but I'll try to keep to the time because in the sake of your patience in the program. This is an old picture of us, and some people are here, some other people have joined. But anyway, it gives you an idea of the amount of people that make the group. Despite the title, the group carries out quite different types of research. And this is a general outline. Maybe the most obvious one is the study of linguistic theory, grounded in formal modeling of natural language data. So maybe that's what comes to your mind, excuse me, when you think of formal linguistics. So typical areas are grammatical areas like syntax, semantics, morphology, but always dealing with the modeling of natural language data. Also in the group we have an important research line dealing with cross-linguistic variation and the formal representation of that variation, not only descriptive, thus. Also socio-linguistic variation, language content, and grammatical change. Maybe you expect a little less of this in a group which is called formal linguistics, but that's there. And also an important line is dynamic representation of meaning. And we'll see who's leading these lines. We also carry out research on experimental analysis and computation implementation as validation of theoretical models. So it's not only theory, there's also this connection to, let's say, the experimental side, let's say. The empirical coverage is also important because we are also, we are middle-sized group, but we are very diverse, as I said, also in terms of the empirical coverage. So we cover both spoken and sign languages. I'll tell you a little bit more about the sign language part. And as you've seen, we cover synchronic and diachronic research. And the methods are also diverse. So some people do corpus analysis, use computational methods. Some other people use more traditional approaches like elicitation, data elicitation, but also experimental methods. So rather.
You have until 10.
So, I thought it was only 10 minutes.
Sí.
Ah, okay.
No, una miqueta més perquè hem començat més tard.
Okay.
Però em queden 10, 15.
I was counting on 10 minutes, but
Mercè,
No, it's
how
fine.
many minutes? 15? No? Just for you two. Li queden 15?
Sí, és que ell
Yeah,
ha començat
15,
més
so
tard.
you can-
Començat més
okay.
tard.
I mean, if I finish early, it will be good for the
For the
for the
questions.
program.
So, yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to tell you again briefly. I'm going to present you let's say the senior researchers of the group and what their research lines are, with some illustrations of the actual research projects that they carry out. Some of them are PhD projects, like the ones that you'll be carrying out. So, first of all, Luis Magnelli and José María Fontana, they work mostly on these two areas, and these three main areas: lexical compositional semantics interface, let's say in a more traditional formal semantics approach. Syntactic and semantic change, that's the area of José María Fontana. The subtopics you find here are topics that are carried out as PhD projects, but not only. And then the third one is a broader one, a more general one, is the theory of natural language meaning, connecting referential conceptual approaches to meaning, which is a rather new line within the group, new already for a couple of years, and the role of type token distinction in theories of meaning. Another subset of research topics is carried out by Laia Mayol and Enric Valldubí. And the description of what they do is actually in this first bullet. They study meaning in context, so very important information structure and discourse structure from a formal perspective, reference accessibility and choice of referential expressions, meaning types and linguistic inference. Also context modeling, so you see that there is a strong pragmatic semantic approach to the study of language. So, but also again with the experimental component, with this let's say, dominating approach in formal pragmatics now, which is experimental pragmatics, introducing experimental work in the study of meaning, and the structural correlates of context-sensitive meaning, like word order, intonation, and morphology, but also affective meaning. So it is, let's say, a selection of the topics that they deal with. And then we have would say, a subunit, or what we call a lab, LSC lab, the Catalan Sign Language Lab, led by me and with my colleague Gemma Barberà. And for some years now, we've been doing grammatical description and formal analysis of sign languages, basically morphosyntax, semantics, and discourse. And here you have some of the topics that, again, have taken the shape of a PhD project, from relative clauses in Catalan sign language, double-edged questions, focus, coordinating and gapping, etc. And also an important, let's say, direction of our research is not only grammatical description, as we said, and theoretical analysis, but also the effects of language modality on language structure. So how the fact that some languages are in a different modality affect or contribute to the particular expression and structure of some languages. So how the use of a space plays a role in some language reference, the role of nominal marking, which is a particular area within the grammars of some languages, anaphora in sign discourse, and pronominal reference. Then we also have Alex Alsina, who is a specialist, a leading researcher in this particular model, which is lexical functional grammar. And he focuses on syntactic analysis within this particular model. The topics he and his students have worked on are agreement in languages like Serbo-Croatian, etc., plain Cree, also unbounded dependencies, morphological and syntactic status of clitics in Romance, in particular in Catalan. This is work by Alsina himself. Also how argument realization takes place, and copular inversion. As I said, within this model, LFG, lexical functional grammar. And finally, we have Martina Vilsko, who is also an ICREA research professor like me, who joined the group last year. And this is her description of what she's doing currently. So she deals with a range of variation of human language in traditional domains of grammar, the ones that we know about, so syntax, semantics, basically, and pragmatics. But also she has let's say, a new look on grammar, which introduces interactional speech, that is basically discourse markers, okay? From a formal perspective, formal syntactic perspective, mostly. And lastly, in collaboration also with GRAEL, the group on grammar and cognition, she's also dealing with research in clinical speech, what happens to language when cognition is impaired. So here you see again connection with another group. This is a very fast, a very simplified version of what we do. We have collaborations with other groups within URLing. I don't know, actually there will be no presentation on UR. Okay. So URLing is Unitat de Recerca en Lingüística. It's a macro group that an umbrella group that embraces all the research groups that deal with linguistics from different perspectives, okay? And once in a while, we have also some events that bring together all the groups, okay? And you are advised to attend those events, like a lecture or a mini course or something like this. We also collaborate with other teams outside Catalonia, excuse me, mainly European, yeah, often through competitive projects. So, I don't know whether, well, oh, no. Okay, so this was a network, a Spanish network of research on meaning, actually, on semantics and pragmatics. RESP is a yearly event so far for PhD students, actually, who are working in semantics and pragmatics, and takes place here in Catalonia. It's organized by us. ScienceHub, which is a European project, a Horizon 2020 project, which finished this year, and which dealt with different aspects of the grammars, and not only of different sign language in Europe. And some others that we will not list here. What do we do with our research? Well, as you heard in the introduction, we need to interact between us, and one ideal and basic activity that we have is this weekly colloquium, the Glyph Seminar, which includes talks, but also training sessions for grad students once in a while on particular abilities like how to set up a poster, how to prepare an article for publication, how to apply for jobs, for instance. And you're most welcome to attend those events as well. And once in a while, we also have reading group sessions, like more directed on, and the students basically say, we want to read about this, or we suggest that students read a particular text, and we discuss it with seniors and junior researchers. We also organize conferences and workshops, so far on-site, and given the circumstances, also online. The last one was Consol, which is a student conference, which has a long tradition in Europe, and it took place here in Barcelona. And also, once in a while, we also organize short courses on a particular topic. Let's say we invite an expert on a particular topic we want to learn about, and this is offered basically to students, but also it's also attended by seniors, because we normally function together. And last but not least, we also organize a yearly calçotada. And for those of you who don't know what a calçotada is, you'll hear about, but it's basically cooking some kind of sweet onions on the fire outside and eating all things apart from the onions, but it's actually the event of cooking this thing and going somewhere all together. And till we run into Corona, We used to have weekly happy hours. The students used to organize weekly happy hours on Fridays mostly, to have a drink, to interact. It wasn't meant only for GLIF students. Actually, it was rather mingled. But I don't know exactly what the status is of the happy hours. And I encourage you to, well, I don't know, to push for it again to the extent that the situation allows for it. Because, of course, doing a PhD is more than just studying and doing hard research work, okay? So actually what Dr. Pérez mentioned before, it's everything around it. And this was basically it. Don't be scared by the trees and come enjoy the language forest. I mean, the group is not huge, and you see that it's already quite diverse, and you'll see even more diversity through the presentations this morning. And even if you are working on in your PhD project, which is very focused, it's on a very specific topic, take advantage of the opportunity you have being here and enriching your background in linguistics. You will become linguists of one sort or the other, but don't close your horizon only to your group, and just have a look at other things, very interesting people who come here or who give lectures, and other people in other groups. Okay, so have a successful and enjoyable time here, and see you around. That was it.
We have a couple of minutes for pressing questions. Any clarification that you would like to have? No? Perhaps it would be interesting to clarify URLIN. So, Unitat de Recerca en Lingüística, a linguistic unit. The government, the Catalan government allowed scientists to come together as research groups. This is what you're going to be seeing today. So you've seen one research group. There was a little bit of funding behind it, but it also encouraged research groups that were doing work which had something in common to then come together at a higher stage and organize units. You could call them labs, perhaps, laboratories or whatever. Names don't matter. But this is what happens with the URLIN. It includes the three first groups you're going to be hearing about this morning, so GLIF, GREP, and COLT. It also includes LLENGUATGE, which unfortunately cannot be here with us today in terms of the leader of the group presenting the work. I'm a member of LLENGUATGE, but this was not, the idea that I would be presenting, but rather the leader who cannot be here. Okay? So this is URLIN. There is no other unit called UNIT, but yet we have another setup, which is an institute. And these are the two groups following the presentations by URLIN. Institut Universitari, so IULA, of Applied Linguistics, de Lingüística Aplicada. And it includes two very powerful groups on lexis, terminology, and computational linguistics and lexis. And those are the two groups that you will hear after that. Okay, so in a sense that systematizes a bit what's going on at the department. And that you have the remaining groups that you will hear about in the morning, which come at the end, towards the end. Okay? And I think that I would like to thank Dr. Quer for his presentation. It was exactly what we needed for the students. A little bit of academia and a little bit of what surrounds it. And I think it's time for a coffee break. And I would like to say a few words for those of us, those of you who are in streaming. We hope the technicalities work well, and we would like to hear from you. Please send us an email message if there are any problems, or even to confirm that everything is going fine, because now we're going for a break. And if there is any problem, any issue, we can solve it now in the forthcoming 15 minutes. So I will be on the alert. Mercè, have we given them at least your email account? They would have your email account so that they could be writing to you. Yes? See? Okay. So please let us know whether the streaming is going well. And as Mercè said, you cannot join us for the break, but we think of you. Okay. Fine, so we can stretch our legs.
Okay, thanks to the two directors. I'm just going to take out the, you gave me permission
So
because there's a...
introduce you to Dr. Pilar.
Thanks very much to the doctoral directors, and I'm really pleased to be here. I see some known faces from the master's program. I also see Julia from our group, and I guess also half of you are also on streaming, so welcome. And I'm here to present my group, which is the Prosodic Studies group, and to explain a little bit what we do, what our research goals are, what our projects are, and the methods we use. And also to invite you, finally, to attend our seminars. We normally organize like one seminar per month, or one or two. So you can go to our webpage and check. Let me just, well, this is already an old picture because Ingrid here defended her thesis in July, and then Julia is coming, so the picture. Okay, our goals are basically, as the title of our group says, we look at prosody, mainly, prosody of language, in relation to gesture too, because over the years, we started only analyzing prosody, and over the years we saw that gesture goes with prosody a lot, right? So many prosodic movements that go up are related to hand movements, and we started to look at them. So our goal is to look at the role of prosody and co-speech gestures many times together in human communication, as well as in language learning and language processing patterns. General questions that we try to answer, and these overarch mainly many of our projects, is to try to understand the semantic relationship between prosody, gesture, and language and speech. Also, we want to understand the patterns of not only semantic alignment, but also phonological alignment and phonetic alignment. So they normally go together, and we want to understand also phonetically the patterns of alignment between the two. Now, many of us are involved in relation to these two questions, are involved in developing a labeling manual that includes not only prosody, because what we see in labeling manuals is that they either focus on prosody, they either focus on gesture or on semantic areas. So we want to have something that would work. And we have right now two databases, English and French TED Talks, and also narrative speech from development. And as you see, Julia has already started working on this project. Okay, and what we're going to do now is basically focus on our research project right now, which is funded by the Madrid and a bit of Recercașa. And this is on trying to understand what is the role of prosody and gesture in language learning and different areas. And I'm going to just go over quickly some of the projects we have right now. And, you know, if they overlap with your projects or you are interested, sometimes we organize seminars related to this project, so you are invited to come. Okay, the general goal of the project is to assess the role of embodiment, what we call embodiment, multimodality, prosody, gesture. So not just what we say, but how we say it. That's our goal. For language learning, what is the gain that you obtain from these features to boost, to train faster language learning patterns? This is the main issue. The motivation, for at least for the acquisition part, comes from a general knowledge that co-speech they basically are boosters of language learning, both in children and in adults. So if you go to, for example, Golden Meadows Lab, they have lots of, PGS language processing. One basic thing that is quite established in the field, then we have of co-speech gestures acting precursors of a language. Like is a key behavior in children in order to predict their language behavior later on, right? But we want to, but on later development, not only looking at pointing gestures, but a variety of gestures, what we call pragmatic and beat gestures, and they have been, in the field. Okay, so two of our projects relate to this research question, which is how multimodal patterns, social pragmatic and narrative is in childhood. It's like a step forward from what we tend to know about co-speech gestures, and not only including co-speech gestures, also prosody. That's the main issue in these two projects that I'm going to explain. One of them is projects is led by Pronina Marussia. She came to the program like 2.5 years ago with an FI grant, and is multimodal trainings in children, 3 to 5 year olds, for boosting socio-pragmatic abilities. So our goal is to detect, for example, theory of mind, what others think, what others are, right? And these are, well, actually, when we went to schools, they were really interested in trying to train this ability in preschoolers. So we had, right now we have a problem with getting some data with because we're having a longitudinal study. But, well, it seems that they're going to let us go back to the school again. Let's see if the situation is fine. Okay, so briefly, how is the procedure for this project? We have, and for many of our projects, they're training studies, and what we do is we have a pretest. Does this work? I don't know. Well, we have a pretest set of measures, and all of individual measures that could affect learning. We have a theory of mind measures, emotion detection measures, socio-pragmatic tests, mental verb comprehension. This is to assess a little bit pragmatic knowledge. And then we do a training, 4 weeks training, 2 sessions. Control group basically draws on, they see a set of stories, basically, on emotions and how the characters of the stories feel like. And here, after they see the stories, they basically draw some of the characters. In here, after seeing the stories, they talk with the experimenter basically about the feelings and emotions of the characters. And here they talk about the feelings and emotion of the characters, but including a lot of recreation and embodiment. Okay, so these studies basically to see a potential difference. Well, we basically seek a big difference between these two, how conversational training, focusing on emotions, can boost your pragmatic knowledge, but also the multimodal, effects. What we saw is that even though I'm not showing results here, but I want to tell you at least, because we got the results not so long ago. Here we have, there's a big statistical difference between these and these two, but no statistical difference between these two, even though effect sizes are much higher for multimodal. This means that perhaps longer trainings or something would have a more effect. But we didn't find it. But still, it's a nice training. Okay, Ingrid, she just defended her thesis in July, beginning of July. And yeah, in her thesis, she basically analyzes the role of modality on improving narrative abilities. And narrative abilities in children are very, very important because they are basically predictors of academic performance, for example, right? And also, by many speech therapists, narratives are the key score for evaluating language at these ages, right? 5 to 8 year olds. So, and she found really, really nice results on this. I mean, with short trainings with gestures, she, at post-test, it was immediate post-test, not very delayed post-test, she obtained very nice differences between the multimodal group and the non-multimodal group. So that was a very nice thesis. She's now working in Girona. Okay, now we move a little bit. These are the projects related to L1. We have some projects related to the acquisition of second language, L2. And again, the same question, multimodal to learn pronunciation. And since we are more interested in phonology, we look more at pronunciation. So Patrick, and you know him from the labeling project. He's involved not only in the labeling project, but also here. He has several studies related to this research question. Is multimodal training equally effective on an L1 or an L2? Our initial hypothesis was that probably we would be more effective than an L1. We're finding exactly this. This is very interesting. Yes, I'm doing fine. And I just want to tell you that he's analyzing not only behavioral data, but also neurophysiological data. This is the only study we're running right now on neurophysiological data in collaboration with people at the Cognition Lab. Okay, then we focus on training and how can improve pronunciation training. We believe that one of the most important things for pronunciation is to learn the prosodic patterns, the rhythmic patterns of the language. And one way to get to the rhythmic pattern is to focus on rhythmic training, like, for example, or melodic rhythmic training. These actually, we've been running many experiments on this, and they always point to the same direction. They help, like embodying your help in getting the target rhythm of the L2 language. There are many things that need to be studied here, or distances between languages, the rhythmic patterns, etc. Right? But yeah, I mean, the results are quite nice in here. Okay, we're also looking not only at the prosodic level, but also at the segmental level, looking at how we can learn specific consonants, specific vowels using the tongue are involved on this, and they have very nice results at the moment on the use, for example, of this gesture, this plosive gesture, to learn aspiration in a second language. But we work quite a lot on very controlled populations. And we're moving much more to classroom settings, and we believe that this is having more people and having classroom trainings can have more strength here. So we're moving slowly. Well, we've run already 2 classroom experiments, but right now with the COVID, it's not that easy. So that's how we have it. Then just mentioning it that we have some support from the Recercaixa project to look at how multimodal boosts, in general, oral presentation abilities in secondary school students. So normally the training of speaking in public is not very much trained, and we believe that there are issues like virtual reality in her case, or having embodied trainings can help boost these. And she collected, well, she was lucky last time because she actually finished collecting data when the alarm state came on, just on the same day. So she was because anything in between would have been just data to be thrown, right? So that's why she's goods. Podeu venir a qualsevol seminari. Normally they are in English. Really welcome, and I hope you really have a nice year and that the virus situation keeps improving, hopefully. Okay, so thanks a lot.
Any pressing question? No? Okay,
So us esperem.
Yeah, thank you very much
Molt
for
bé,
your
merci.
presentation. You know, open doors.
Sí, agafo això un moment. Bueno, ja ho agafaré després, no? Sí. Ai, això també. Sí, és veritat.
Netegem això. Would you like to set your packet? Yes, please. You can come this way. You have to come this way.
But it's so crowded.
I'll move around. Ja em donaré després d'això. No em quedo So we now move on to the Cohort group led by Dr. Gemma Boleda. Gemma Boleda hasn't been able to be here with us. So we have yes. So it's Matthijs, you have to tell us how to pronounce it, perhaps?
Yes, my name is Matthijs Westera.
Okay. Would you like to hold this microphone, or would you rather have?
Is it, well, this one is fine. Sure.
Yeah, sure, I just bring it. Okay. And you have to move in this bit, because we are streaming. Yes.
All right, so sorry on behalf of Gemma that she can't be here. She would have loved to, but she's currently on sick leave. This is us. This is the Cohort group, Computational Linguistics and Linguistic Theory. And I'm just going to show you faces and tell you some first names to make it a bit personal, but if you really want to know who they are, look on the website. Well, I'll stick with the PhD. So that is Laura, Jonuts, Lucas, Roberto, Sheshen, and Eleonora. And they're kind of, on the left, they are more senior, and on the right, they are just starting, like Eleonora. Is she here, actually? No. I think she's currently looking for a place to live in Barcelona, and then she's starting her PhD. The two most senior researchers are Gemma Boleda and Marco Baroni. And in what follows, I'm just going to give you some examples of the research we do. Oh yeah, first a more general overview. Have a look at the website, contact us, ask us what we're doing, and if you find it interesting, maybe we can collaborate in some way. We organize some events. They're not regular at the moment. We used to have around one seminar every month or so. And they're open to everybody, and they will be announced through the website. The main goal of the Computational Linguistics and Linguistic Theory Research Group is to understand how language works. And there is a typo, but that's okay, a typo in the crucial word that defines us all. We use computational linguistics techniques as a research method. Techniques from artificial intelligence, so that includes deep learning, but also the more traditional, shallow machine learning. We also look for the interface with formal linguistics, especially formal semantics and pragmatics, and a bit of syntax. And we are inspired by cognitive science and also try to find the link there. Here are some topics. Most of us are working on several topics, but these are I believe these capture kind of the main topics at the moment: semantics and pragmatics, grounding language in vision, reference, the way we can refer linguistically to objects, entity representations in a neural network memory. So how does a neural network build up, when it's processing text, how does it build up representations of the entities to which the text is referring? Some of us are working on language evolution, or the evolution of the language faculty, and some of us are working on generalization and compositionality in language acquisition. I've never presented live before, and now I notice my thingy keeps slipping. And we're interested in the abilities of artificial neural networks in acquiring generalization and compositionality, but we think they're interesting primarily because these neural networks are like very general learning mechanisms. And if we understand how this very general learning mechanism can acquire something about language, maybe that can inform our theories about how humans do it with this lump of wet stuff in our heads. I'm just going to go through 5 or 6 examples, I believe. Give me the decks. This is work by Christina, who was with us until last year, and Thomas, who is a postdoc, who's now in the group, and Gemma. And what happens if you ask, mostly a child, but maybe adults too, give me the decks? Which object will they give you? This one, right? And that's because if there's an unknown word, that's probably because we haven't seen the object yet, because it's an unknown object. So we make this mapping between an unknown word and an unknown object. And the question that these smart people in the corner are looking at is, why does it work this way? Why do we make this connection between the word and that new object? Is it a bias that plays a role in word acquisition? Or is it pragmatic reasoning? Something like, well, if they had wanted to refer to this, they would have used the more typical word cup. They didn't, so they must have meant this. That's a sort of real-time pragmatic reasoning, as opposed to something that happens more slowly through acquisition. And they're using neural networks as a sort of toy human to play around with. And the conclusion from their neural network experiments is that it could be either of these. So both of these mechanisms, when you implement them in a computer model, they could result in this behavior. And they're running more sophisticated experiments now to see what the differences are between these two pathways to this behavior. Here's a publication if you're interested. Next project, visual object naming. And this is from Karina, who was also here until last year. She was a postdoc. Zina, who is somewhere else. Gemma and me and Eleonora, the new PhD, will be working on this as well. The idea is that when you want to name an object in an image or when you want to refer to it, you can use many different words. And Karina ran an experiment, a large-scale crowdsourcing experiment, which resulted in, for instance, 27 people calling this a bird and 8 people calling this a duck, whereas here, 33 people calling it a duck and only 3 calling it a bird. And then there was one idiot who called it a chicken. And I mean, this was a very large-scale experiment with tens of thousands of images and names. And it marks a change compared to existing work, which has typically assumed that there's going to be just one name for each object. So this is really about naming variation. And in the most recent paper, I joined the crowd. I was a bit late to the project. We look at how the mistakes that artificial intelligence models make when they're trying to name objects in images, and they're already very good at it. And we look at whether the mistakes that these artificial intelligence models make are similar to the mistakes that humans make. And the conclusion is, by and large, they make quite similar mistakes to us, like misidentifying an object or naming the wrong object that's not in the red rectangle. But there is some variation between domains. So computers still confuse clothing and types of humans very much, whereas that's something that humans are very good at distinguishing, like sweater versus t-shirt. But then computers may be better at animals or something, I'm not sure. Anyway, next example. Referring expression choice and predictability, and this is mainly the project of 2 PhD students, Shishan and Laura. The hypothesis is that pronouns in English and across languages where they have pronouns are used for more predictable reference than more complete noun phrases like a determiner with a noun or with an adjective in between. This is quite intuitive, right? If you already know who I'm going to talk about, I can just say he or she or they. And the research method that we're exploring at the moment is to use an AI model that can do co-reference resolution. So if you give it a text, it knows which words co-refer to the same object. To use that to estimate this notion of how predictable was the entity being referred to. Let me give a more concrete example. Here's a sentence. Sue was at the protest with Bill and his daughter. She called me later. Who does she refer to? Well, it could be daughter, it could be his, but that's a bit weird, because then the genders misalign. Can it be Bill? Also not very likely. Could it be Sue? That's quite likely again. And so a computer model that can do co-reference will assign different probabilities to these different possible antecedents. So this model considers Sue to be by far the most likely antecedent. This is all a fictional example, by the way. Or maybe it's a new entity, right? Maybe it refers to something new altogether. Now, how are we going to get this notion of entity predictability out of this neural network model? We're going to mask the pronoun. And then we're going to ask the model, okay, can you tell us now who are the most likely antecedents? You only know that there will be a mentioning expression, but not which expression it is. And then the numbers change, so now maybe it's a bit more uncertain, but still it considers the subject antecedent to be quite likely, because that's how language normally works. We try to build a story about the subject. And then by comparing the probability assigned to the correct antecedent when it saw the pronoun, we compare that to the probability assigned to the correct antecedent when the pronoun was masked. And we see that when the pronoun is masked, sorry, I should rephrase it. When the referring expression was masked, if originally it was a pronoun, then it would have already guessed the correct antecedent with some probability. Whereas if the original mention had been a name or a determiner plus a noun, then the probability assigned to the correct referent without seeing the mention was lower. I realize I'm going quite fast. I hope just to give you an impression of the kind of stuff we do. So this seems to suggest that, yes, when we use a pronoun, the correct antecedent was already quite likely to be the antecedent, regardless of the mentioning expression, and more likely than if we use the more complete noun phrase, which seems to corroborate this initial hypothesis. Example 4. This is work by Jonuts, another PhD student in the project, in the group, together with Tomasz Mikolov and Erman Kruszewski. And I'm just going to show you 2 pictures from the paper that they wrote about this. So this is a computer model that's first exposed to French, and then it's exposed to Spanish, and then it's exposed to French again. And so it's switching between languages. And this graph tells you how good is it at that language. And you see that lower is better. So basically the graph shows how bad is it at a language, right? How many errors does it make? And it becomes better and better and better at French, and then you switch to a different language, and it's horrible at Spanish, and it's become better and better and so on. And so what they did is they kind of invented this sort of task and looked at the behavior of different neural network models. How well can they adapt when you have this sort of code switching going on? This jump back is called catastrophic forgetting, because they used to be quite good at French, but then being exposed to a different language, they forgot all about it, which is not normally how, for instance, bilingual children grow up, right? Something else that's quite interesting, another figure from their paper, is that if you then look at, so these computer models, they use different parts for different languages, that kind of emerges from the structure they use. And then you can compare the different parts they use for different languages and see how similar are they. And that allowed them to say that, so these are sort of correlations. Of course, the part of the model that does German correlates perfectly with the part of the model that does German. It correlates a bit less with the part of the model that does English, and even less for French and Spanish and Czech. And so you can construct a kind of language hierarchy by looking at what this model is doing when it is trying to learn these languages. Compositionality is a topic that many of us also find interesting. And this project is by our PhD Roberto with the senior researcher Marco Baroni. If you teach a neural network what jump means and what run twice means, can it then also jump twice? Or can it interpret jump twice? And here's a table. Let's see what it means. They compare two different types of AI models. Three. LSTM, GRU, and CNN. Doesn't really matter what they are. And in the left column, they presented the model, they trained the model with sentences like jump twice and then run right and then walk left, sentences of this kind. And in this column, they just had random sentences according to this sort of toy grammar. And then it was tested on another random data set, but none of the sentences from the training set were used in the testing set. So it was able to generalize with 100% accuracy to the novel sentences when it was trained on a sort of arbitrary mix of sentences generated according to certain grammar. This column shows you what happens if you restrict the training data. If you don't train it on all sort of random sort of structures, but only sentences where the word jump only occurs on its own. So you're never going to have jump around or jump right or jump left. It's always only jump. Can it then generalize to constructions where jump does occur in this larger compound, like jump right or jump twice? And it's not as good. So even though it has seen run twice and it has seen jump, it has no idea what jump twice means. And this is a similarly restricted data set where it performs even a bit worse. But the details don't matter, I say, but actually I just forgot them. So this example and the last couple of examples illustrate how you can use artificial languages or artificial models, computer models. This illustrates how you can use artificial languages to probe neural networks. So you have a neural network that is very good at processing human language, and then you feed it a toy language that is restricted in certain ways. And then you can investigate, what does it learn? Can it still do as well as it used to? And this is a way of using artificial intelligence techniques as a sort of toy human again, with which you can experiment. You couldn't take a baby and decide, let's only tell it jump on its own and never in a compound sentence, right? You can't do that with a human baby, but you can do it with a neural network. And the hope is, of course, that we learn something that does generalize to the human domain again. I think this is the last example. This is by our PhD student, Lucas. And they're interested in, well, can neural networks generalize? And in a way, the previous example is also about generalization, right? But it's more about generalization in a compositional way. This is about generalization in the domain of negative polarity items. In particular, do neural networks acquire a concept of negative polarity item and their licensing contexts? I'm not sure if everyone's familiar with negative polarity items, but these are things that can occur, for instance, in the scope of a negation, or in downward entailing contexts, or in questions, or in the restrictor of a universal quantifier. There are a couple of environments that allow it, and many that don't. And what they did, let's see, they did many things, but this is just one image that I liked from the paper. Here we see different possible contexts that could license a negative polarity item. On the horizontal axis, this is an exponential or a logarithmic scale, beware, so this is a lot bigger than this. You have the number of occurrences of this type of context per 100,000 sentences. So that's like the frequency of that type of context in some natural language data set. On the vertical axis, it has the number of instances the computer model has to see before it can do these kinds of contexts quite well. So how often do you need to expose it to an adverb before it understands that it licenses negative polarity items? It turns out to be maybe around 400 cases. So it needs to see 400 examples of a particular adverb to understand whether it licenses negative polarity items. And they find this sort of curve where the more frequent a construction is, the more data of it the model needs to really understand it. Or the less frequent it is, the fewer items it needs for it to learn it. And that's kind of a paradoxical result. You would expect the less frequent things to maybe be harder or something. But they explain this in terms of transfer of knowledge. So by being exposed to these things a lot, they can use that knowledge to then also acquire the less frequent licensing contexts much more quickly. And so they take this as potential evidence that the model acquires this concept of, oh yeah, you see my nose, it acquires this concept of a negative polarity item licensing context. And I'll end with this slide. So, thanks.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Any pressing question? Thank you very much for keeping to time. But we have our coffee break and we want to be very much on time.
Yep, sure.
You have heard a third of the, can I borrow the microphone otherwise? So thank you very much. You have heard a third of all the presentations you're going to hear, 3, and there will be 9, okay? And you've already seen the variety of objectives, research objectives and approaches. More and more is to come. But now, coffee break. Please, can you take your yellow piece of paper down to the cafeteria, because this is your voucher, and read the instructions on it, and you know what the department is gently offering you as a mid-morning refreshment.
Bé, ¿som tots? ¿Sí? ¿Estamos todos? Bien, pues retomamos las sesiones. Ahora las 2 presentaciones que os haremos corresponden a los 2 grandes grupos del Instituto de Lingüística Aplicada. Este instituto se creó ya en el año 94 y es un instituto que se creó alrededor de la idea de la lingüística aplicada de orientación francesa, es decir, creación de recursos gramaticales, de diccionarios, vocabularios, ontologías, corpus textuales, por tanto, materiales, y por tanto está orientada fundamentalmente hacia el léxico, pero con un componente tecnológico muy importante. El primer grupo que hoy os presentaré es el grupo IULATERM. Por term ya veis que es un grupo creado y pensado para trabajar en lenguaje especializado, en léxico especializado. Voy avanzando. Se creó el grupo, como veis tiene un subtítulo, Lexicon and Technology, y se fundó por María Teresa Cabré, que es en el ámbito de la terminología científico-técnica, del léxico de especialidad. Yo creo que en este momento es la referencia mundial. Es decir, que ella ha desarrollado una teoría que siguen en muchos países y, por tanto, esto de alguna manera es un elemento que siempre resaltamos. Forma parte, como os decía, del instituto y desde el 2001 tiene consideración, como antes os comentaba también Carmen, de grupo consolidado financiado por la Generalitat. El grupo es un grupo relativamente grande, en este momento somos 19 investigadores doctores, algunos aquí son profesores de esta universidad, algunos están ejerciendo de profesores o jefes de investigación en alguna otra universidad. Y luego tenemos 15 jóvenes investigadores que están realizando su tesis doctoral y que tienen vinculación con la Pompeu Fabra. Algunos trabajan fuera y simplemente realizan su tesis, pero 10 de estos están físicamente aquí en las salas del centro. Y como os decía, el grupo, al ser tan grande, se organiza en dos grandes equipos. El equipo de léxico y el equipo de tecnologías. Además, el grupo también, o los miembros de nuestro grupo, se organizan en tres grandes espacios o laboratorios de desarrollo, de transferencia a la sociedad. El primero es el Observatorio de Neología, que es el primer observatorio de palabras nuevas que se creó en el Estado español. Existía un observatorio en Francia, existía otro en Canadá, pero no había esta tradición y fue el primero. Ahora hay redes que coordinan todos los observatorios de neología en el Estado español, en América Latina, en Europa. Luego tenemos el portal de terminología, donde publicamos todos nuestros recursos y las herramientas que vamos desarrollando para el tratamiento del léxico, pero sobre todo del léxico especializado. Y por último, un laboratorio de tecnologías lingüísticas que en este momento está trabajando en corpus oral, pero ha trabajado en corrección de textos, en paralelización de corpus, etcétera, etcétera. Luego tenemos además la suerte de que Teresa Cabré, que ya se jubiló, nos ha cedido su biblioteca y, por tanto, en el espacio de IULATERM, si alguien necesita consultar, hay algunas obras que no son localizables fácilmente en bibliotecas y, por tanto, es un buen espacio también para recibir personas que quieran consultar bibliografía específica o archivos. Como os decía, las líneas de investigación las podemos organizar en tres grandes bloques. El que tenéis en verde son todas las líneas de investigación que hemos ido desarrollando en presente o en pasado en el subgrupo de léxico. La terminología, en este momento sobre todo estamos trabajando en terminología médica, porque el discurso de la salud es un discurso que de pasta tiene muchas necesidades y en este momento todo el ámbito sanitario reclama estudios para mejorar la relación médico-paciente o para aclarar la información que reciben los pacientes o los familiares o para crear, por ejemplo, comunidades virtuales de pacientes que acaban siendo una especie de expertos en la materia, aunque no sean médicos ni enfermeras, pero son pacientes que al final incorporan la terminología de manera muy clara. Neología, las palabras nuevas, sobre todo en catalán y en castellano, en catalán y en español, pero en contacto y cediendo metodología a otros muchos nodos internacionales. Lexicografía especializada, vocabularios de medicina, de jurisprudencia, de lo que sea. Discurso especializado, variación lingüística y cambio léxico. La neología ya es un tipo de cambio, pero las palabras nacen y algunas se mueren y desaparecen, otras cambian y este elemento, ya hemos visto que muchos de los grupos que hemos visto anteriormente hablan del cambio. Este es un tema que vuelve a aparecer con fuerza, pero todos desde perspectivas distintas. Nosotros lo hacemos desde el léxico, fundamentalmente, y por tanto también morfología, semántica, sintaxis léxica. El otro gran subgrupo, dirigido por la doctora Núria Bel, ya la veréis después, trabaja en tecnologías del lenguaje o lingüística computacional, como prefiráis, y en corpus lingüísticos. Por tanto, han trabajado en opinion mining, en análisis de sentimientos, en traducción automática, en construcción de corpus, en recuperación de información, etc. Y por último, hay una línea nueva que se ha incorporado gracias a la entrada en el grupo del profesor Joan Costa y de otra persona, de Carla Amorós, que está desarrollando una línea propia, en la gestión de las lenguas y de la diversidad lingüística, por tanto del multilingüismo, planificación lingüística, es decir, todo lo que sería el análisis de los procesos de normalización y estandarización y también de normativización de las lenguas. Esto además no es una casualidad que se haya introducido en este grupo, porque a través de la terminología y la enología trabajamos con lenguas muy diversas, lenguas bien conocidas de todos y de carácter que tienen sus recursos, pero también estamos trabajando en lenguas minorizadas. El ejemplo del catalán no es bien una lengua pequeña, es una lengua mediana, pero hemos trabajado en lenguas de América Latina, etcétera, lenguas genuinas que tienen necesidad de crear corpus, diccionarios, gramáticas, etc. El grupo, como os decía, de tecnología trabaja en la creación, sobre todo en la adquisición, formalización, gestión, validación en Natural Language Processing, y el grupo LATEL o el laboratorio de LATEL, sobre todo, como os decía, ofrece servicios al exterior, constitución de recursos, paralelización para medios de comunicación, para el Parlamento catalán hubo un proyecto hace muy poco, ahora en este momento para la academia, etc. El observatorio, que os decía que es otro de nuestros elementos de presentación, es un laboratorio, es un observatorio. Observamos en la prensa cada día, primero lo hacíamos manualmente y ahora lo hacemos automáticamente o semiautomáticamente, las novedades que aparecen en la prensa diaria, en catalán y en español. Y además coordinamos una serie de nodos en Europa y en América, sobre todo, y en España también, para el catalán y para el castellano, o español, y prácticamente esta es nuestra tarea. ¿Por qué un observatorio? Observatorio lo que hace es observar la novedad, analizarla y ver si es una novedad diccionarizable, si se puede entrar en los diccionarios. Por tanto, ¿a quién le interesa un observatorio? A las academias que realizan diccionarios, a las empresas editoriales que hacen diccionarios y a otro tipo de agentes de la sociedad. El grupo es un grupo que es grande, como veis, y además al haber tenido este líder tan fuerte con un núcleo producción teórica en terminología muy importante, ha hecho que tengamos mucha capacidad formativa y esto hay que subrayarlo. Nosotros supervisamos cada año las tesis que vienen, pero desde el 99 ya se han defendido, dirigidas por el grupo, 69 tesis doctorales, acabo enseguida, y algunas de las cuales tienen premios, pero además centramos también nuestro interés formativo en el máster online en terminología. Es un máster con un ámbito de especialidad muy concreto, solo es en línea, pero es un máster a precios públicos, pero es un máster no universitario para acceder al doctorado, es un máster más de orientación profesionalizadora o de especialización. Estos son los supervisores generales, los seniors, algunos bastante jóvenes, otros no tanto. Nuria Bell, de Lingüística Computacional, Rosa Estopà, de Terminología y Neología, Judit Freixa, de Neología sobre todo, yo misma, Joan Costa, como os decía, Ona Domènech, que ella es profesora en la UOC, en la Universitat Oberta de Catalunya, Iria D'Acuña, que es profesora en la Universitat a Distancia de Española, y María Mor Montaner, que en este momento está en la Academia Catalana, pero que continúa vinculada a nuestro grupo como investigadora, y tenemos otros investigadores que están aquí o fuera, los que podéis conocer más adelante. Las tesis, como veis, son temas muy dispersos, muy diversos, no dispersos, diversos. Eventividad en biomedicina, el cambio léxico en las constituciones españolas desde 1812 hasta la actualidad, la identificación de los neologismos desde el punto de vista tecnológico, desde el punto de vista del cambio diacrónico en un corpus. Bien, la introducción del léxico especializado en la enseñanza del chino. Hemos tenido tesis bien diversas. Y acabo ya con esto. Tenéis un espacio, todos los grupos de la casa tienen sus propios espacios. En el caso de IULATERM es un espacio bastante agradable, grande, y por tanto siempre hay, aparte de la gente que trabajamos con sensación de laboratorio, siempre hay algún invitado. Y bueno, los miembros participan en los proyectos, en la organización de seminarios quincenales, en las publicaciones que siempre realizamos, y vamos a los congresos y nos ayudamos para hacerlo, y nada, y potenciamos que los doctorandos hagan estancias sobre todo en centros europeos o americanos. Y aquí nos tenéis una fotografía donde no estamos todos, y hoy me he dado cuenta que tenemos que actualizar la fotografía, pero muy bien. Nada, si tenéis alguna pregunta.
¿Alguna pregunta? Yo te pediría una aclaración, quizá.
Sí.
Has hablado 2 veces de academias. La Academia
de la Lengua
Catalana,
Española.
y quizá iría bien aclarar, especialmente para diferentes países, ¿no?
La Real Academia Española es una academia exclusivamente de la lengua. Es la Real Academia de la Lengua Española, todo el mundo la conoce. En Cataluña lo que se hizo, no en Cataluña, sino en todo lo que se llaman los países de habla catalana, que no solo es la Comunidad de Cataluña, sino que también están las Islas Baleares, Valencia. En Italia, en Cerdeña, está la pequeña ciudad del Alguer, donde se hacen actividades, lo que llamamos Cataluña Nord, que está al otro lado de la frontera, y la franja. Por tanto, es toda una franja mediterránea donde se habla el catalán. La academia para esta comunidad es el Institut d'Estudis Catalans. Pero, a diferencia de la Real Academia Española, no es solo una academia de lengua, es una academia de lengua y ciencias. Y es la secció filològica, la sección de filología dentro del instituto, la que se ocupa de la normativa para la lengua catalana. Y claro, como la Real Academia, hacen sus diccionarios, sus gramáticas, etc.
¿Sabes puedes indicar dónde está?
Sí, yo había pensado en los seminarios, como haremos, si mejoran las condiciones, yo siempre ya les habíamos dicho cuando hicimos las tutorías que estaría bien que de vez en cuando, pues si nos podemos ver y podemos hacer cosas. Y una visita que quería yo pedir cuando se pueda hacer al instituto sería ver la sede del instituto. Está justo en el centro de Barcelona, al lado de la Plaza de Cataluña, y es un edificio renacentista, con unas, ¿cómo se llama?, cerámica en la pared típica de la época, siglos XV y XVI, y vale la pena visitarlo, y nos podrían enseñar pues, cómo se trabaja allí. Trabajan más de 100 lingüistas, como en todas las academias, además de los miembros, es un lugar también para pensar como futuro, ¿no? Los lingüistas no solo tienen la salida de la enseñanza, el mundo editorial, el mundo de las academias, es un mundo que tenemos que tener presente muchas veces para aplicar nuestras salidas profesionales, ¿no? Muy bien.
Fantástico. Muchísimas gracias.
Uno de vuestros compañeros, que no está aquí, está en streaming, Miguel Ángel Verón, que es del Paraguay. Él ya es una persona ya adulta, mayor, ya, y él es miembro de la Academia del Guaraní en Paraguay. Por tanto, el mundo de las academias es un mundo vivo, aunque mucha gente no lo conoce. Uy, sí. Me iba ya con el... Jo d'aquest també te'l rento.
Damos paso a la siguiente presentación del doctor Prieto, representante del segundo grupo en IULA, que es Infolex. Adelante.
Pues se me oye bien con este cacharro tan... Me siento un poco como un cantante de moda. Esto es la voz Kids, pues casi lo mismo. Bueno, Bienvenidos todos a esta sesión. Ya sé que lleváis mucho rato para vosotros en la sesión, pero es la primera vez que hablo hoy yo aquí. Por lo tanto, bienvenidos al trocito de sesión que hablará del grupo Infolex. Como os ha explicado antes Mercè Lorente, es un grupo que forma parte del... Se me entiende bien, ¿verdad? Con la mascarilla, me la dejaré puesta. Es un grupo que forma parte del Instituto Universitario de Lingüística Aplicada, del IULA, que tiene dos grandes grupos, IULATERM y nosotros que somos Infolex. Intentaré ceñirme al tiempo. He hecho igual que ha hecho Mercè, hablaré en español porque me es más fácil hablar en español. Si alguien tiene alguna cosa que no entiende, lo puedo intentar explicar en inglés también, pero hablaré en español porque tengo las transparencias en inglés para si alguien tiene dificultades para seguir el español. Haré primero una presentación general del grupo. Infolex está formado a partir del principio de información y el principio de léxico o lexicografía. Y eso define lo que es Infolex. Infolex es un grupo que está interesado en la información que hay codificada en el léxico. Por lo tanto, estudia el léxico e intenta establecer qué información lleva el léxico. Desde hace ya muchos años la lingüística ha hecho un giro lexicalista y ya se sabe que el léxico lleva mucha información, información gramatical, información pragmática, información semántica, de muchos tipos. Infolex le interesa la descripción de la información que hay en el léxico, en especial la descripción que se hace en los diccionarios. Por lo tanto, hace una investigación de léxico aplicada, con la mirada puesta en la información que hay que proporcionar sobre el léxico en los diccionarios. De hecho, es un grupo, como todos los grupos de investigación que están presentando hoy aquí, es un grupo diverso y heterogéneo. Hay unos intereses comunes, pero luego cada investigador tiene sus intereses particulares que encajan dentro de este interés común. ¿Qué define como grupo a Infolex? Pues dos rasgos principalmente. El primero es el objeto de estudio. Es el léxico, el análisis refinado del léxico, de la información que lleva el léxico, con una mirada aplicada en los diccionarios. No exclusivamente, pero sí en los diccionarios. Y el segundo es una metodología, que es la metodología de corpus. Son metodologías de análisis de datos aplicadas. No es lingüística teórica, hacemos también investigación básica, pero es investigación empírica que parte de datos empíricos, en general, como rasgo general de todo el grupo. Dentro de estos rasgos así generales, ¿cuáles son los intereses del grupo en concreto? La investigación que hace en concreto. Pues la primera, los diccionarios. Los diccionarios son objetos muy complejos que se pueden analizar desde muy diversos puntos de vista. Se pueden analizar, por ejemplo, historia de los diccionarios. Se pueden analizar muchos aspectos de los diccionarios. Lo que define a Infolex es esta visión de análisis lingüístico del léxico para enriquecer la información lexicográfica. Y dentro de esto, pues hay diccionarios generales, sobre todo del español, del catalán y del inglés. Mucho énfasis en diccionarios de aprendizaje, es decir, diccionarios pensados para usuarios que están aprendiendo una segunda lengua, diccionarios de español para extranjeros, y diccionarios bilingües en diversas combinaciones con el catalán y con el español. El segundo gran ámbito de interés es el léxico, diversos aspectos del léxico, a veces más teóricos, a veces más aplicados, pero siempre relacionados con el léxico. Y aquí hay varias líneas de investigación que investigadores distintos del grupo trabajan. Morfología, neología, combinatoria léxica, es decir, colocaciones y fraseología, y semántica léxica. Después también tenemos traducción. Ya os han presentado y os presentarán grupos que trabajan en la traducción dentro del departamento. Nosotros también tenemos gente que se dedica a la traducción y lo que caracteriza a la gente que hace traducción con nosotros es este trabajo con metodologías de corpus. Y finalmente, otros ámbitos de interés, en especial la variación lingüística y la sociolingüística, que aparentemente no tiene nada que ver con lo otro, pero lo tiene que ver en la metodología de trabajo. Lo tiene que ver en la metodología de trabajo. De hecho, el grupo que os ha presentado antes, IULATERM, también hace este tipo de cosas porque la metodología es una metodología que define el núcleo de lo que es el Instituto Universitario de Lingüística Aplicada. Una visión muy rápida del grupo. El grupo se creó en el 94, es decir, es de los grupos históricos del departamento. Su primera investigadora principal, su primera directora fue Maripaz Batener, que ya hace unos cuantos años que está jubilada. Igual a alguien le suena el nombre, porque ahora que hablábamos de academias, es miembro de la Real Academia Española de la Lengua. Como en la Real Academia Española de la Lengua hay muy pocas mujeres, las pocas que hay las lucen mucho, o sea que la habréis visto en los medios de comunicación a menudo, aparte de que se lo gana por las opiniones que tienen mucho peso. Y actualmente, desde hace unos años, el investigador principal soy yo, que soy... Perdón, ahora me doy cuenta que no me he presentado, soy Sergio Torner, lo teníais en el papel, pero lo podría haber dicho. Ah, lo ha dicho, gracias. Suerte que alguien se ocupa de rellenar mis vacíos de memoria. Bueno, para presentar el grupo, la composición del grupo, pues si fuéramos rigurosos tendría que hablar de los investigadores senior, también de los colaboradores que tenemos en otras universidades extranjeras o españolas y en editoriales, por ejemplo. Tendría que hablar de los estudiantes de doctorado, tendría que hablar de los antiguos estudiantes de doctorado que ya no forman parte del grupo pero siguen siendo colaboradores. Lo que pasa es que si hago todo esto, pues necesitaré toda la mañana para hablar del grupo y tampoco somos tan importantes como para dedicarnos una mañana. Y entonces me centraré en los investigadores senior. ¿Vale? Los investigadores senior somos estos que voy a ir presentando aquí, somos 6 en total. El primero soy yo y en cada uno he indicado las áreas de trabajo principales y las lenguas principales en las que trabaja. No quiere decir que no pueda trabajar en más lenguas. Yo he dirigido tesis sobre el inglés, pero mi investigación es en español, fundamentalmente. Entonces, yo me dedico a la lexicografía monolingüe, a la neología, a la combinatoria léxica y a la semántica léxica. Estos son mis principales áreas de interés. Después está Jenny Brume, que trabaja en lexicografía monolingüe y bilingüe, en fraseología, en historia del léxico y en la traducción. De hecho, ha trabajado mucho en traducción y en especial en todo lo que tiene que ver con la oralidad fingida. Y ella trabaja fundamentalmente en español y en alemán, aunque también está dirigiendo tesis sobre el chino. Quiero decir que esto nos pasa un poco a todos los que estamos presentando hoy cosas aquí. En tercer lugar, Elisenda Bernal, que trabaja también en lexicografía bilingüe y monolingüe, en neología y morfología, fundamentalmente del catalán. Después, Blanca Arias, que es nuestra última incorporación, es para que se vea que también hay gente joven como investigadores senior, que trabaja también en lexicografía monolingüe del español, fundamentalmente, y trabaja sobre todo mucho en traducción audiovisual y en accesibilidad a los medios. En quinto lugar, Janet de Cesaris, que trabaja en lexicografía monolingüe y bilingüe, fundamentalmente del inglés y en morfología. Fundamentalmente, y como en todos estos que estoy presentando, de hecho pueden hacer otras cosas. Una tesis que veréis que ha dirigido hace poco es sobre el parlache, que es un dialecto colombiano. Y en último lugar, Esteba Clua, que trabaja en variación lingüística y en sociolingüística y también en morfología. Si alguien se pregunta por qué tiene que ver este orden, por qué los he presentado en este orden, esto es simplemente porque esto me permite explicar que estos dos últimos investigadores forman un subgrupo dentro del grupo, que es lo que llamamos morfoval, que es dentro de Infolex hay un subgrupo que se dedica sobre todo a la morfología y a la variación lingüística. Bien. Un modo de saber qué hace un grupo de investigación y a qué se dedica es ver qué proyectos tiene o ha tenido últimamente. Nosotros en estos momentos tenemos 2 proyectos en curso. Uno es Neómetro, que es un proyecto compartido con IULATERM, el grupo del que os he hablado antes. De hecho, una cosa que caracteriza la investigación que hacemos, yo creo que en el IULA, pero en general en todo el departamento, es que es muy transversal, de modo que hay muchas conexiones entre investigadores de grupos distintos. Entonces, nosotros tenemos un grupo con 2 investigadores principales, uno de cada grupo, que trabaja la neología del español y los criterios para diccionarizar esta neología. Y ahora, desde hace muy poco, la última convocatoria, Jenny Brume ha obtenido un proyecto financiado sobre percepción de la diversidad lingüística en los materiales de enseñanza del español, que tiene que ver con una de estas líneas de trabajo que mencionaba, que aparentemente no están directamente relacionadas con el grupo, pero que sí que tienen una relación con el grupo por su metodología. Y es variación lingüística desde una perspectiva diacrónica. Muy rápidamente, para que veáis el tipo de intereses del grupo, los proyectos que hemos tenido en los últimos años, me remonto solo hasta el 2012, hemos tenido análisis léxico basado en corpus y su incidencia en los diccionarios, la representación de la comunidad léxica en los diccionarios. Veis, por lo tanto, dos cuestiones de cómo mejorar diccionarios, una de variación lingüística y análisis de la distancia lingüística en los ejes espacial y temporal, otro que tiene que ver con variación lingüística de Jenny Brume y el significado léxico dependiente de contexto, que tiene que ver otra vez con lexicografía. Por lo tanto, son intereses diversos alrededor del léxico. Y lo último casi que explicaré son las tesis doctorales. También tenemos, no las he contabilizado, ahora me doy cuenta, pero tenemos muchas tesis en estos momentos, dirigidas en estos momentos, y no estoy contando las de los nuevos doctorandos que pueden entrar, o sea, las vuestras y los que están escuchando por streaming, sino las de promociones anteriores. Tenemos todas estas tesis de aquí. Como veis, hay un poco de todo, las intento agrupar. Hay un primer grupo de tesis que tienen que ver con léxico propiamente dicho y relación con los diccionarios, una de sufijos apreciativos, de morfología y lexicografía, uno de equivalencia en diccionarios bilingües, español-chino, y uno de neología en lengua de signos catalana, o sea, relacionados directamente con el léxico y con los diccionarios. Luego tenemos unas cuantas tesis que están relacionadas con la traducción o el contacto de lenguas, con esta perspectiva de análisis de la traducción muy lingüística. La del eufemismo en un estudio contrastivo español y chino, una de traducción de series españolas en el chino, uno de traducción de análisis del léxico en las traducciones del catalán y uno de traducción de lenguaje juvenil en la novela. Y finalmente por eso que os decía que todos tenemos otros intereses que van un poquitín más allá, una que estoy codirigiendo yo con una persona que hace análisis del discurso sobre un tema de análisis del discurso. Porque todos tenemos estos intereses. Y si os fijáis, la mayoría de nuestras tesis son en codirección, porque la mayoría de los tesinandos de nuestro grupo tienen temas muy transversales. Y las que hemos hecho, he intentado remontarme un poquitín, pero no mucho. Quería coger 5 años, pero no me cabían en una transparencia, por lo tanto he cogido solo desde el 2017, hemos dirigido todas estas, que no las voy a ver con tanta calma, pero como veréis también hay unas cuantas de léxico y diccionarios, hay unas cuantas de traducción y hay un par que tienen que ver más con pragmática o con otros aspectos lingüísticos. O sea que dentro de esta perspectiva del léxico y de la mirada sobre los datos empíricos que nos proporcionan los corpus, nos podemos acercar a muchos objetos de estudio distintos. Y ya para acabar, solo 2 cuestiones. ¿Qué actividades hacemos en el grupo que puedan ser útiles para los doctorandos? Hacemos fundamentalmente 2 cosas. Una es seminarios de investigación, aunque este año todavía no sé cómo lo vamos a hacer. Hasta este año, antes de que llegara este bicho raro que nos lo ha tergiversado todo, nosotros hacíamos reuniones semanales donde invitábamos a alguien externo a darnos una charla. A veces eran investigadores de otras universidades, a veces eran gente que trabajaba en empresas editoriales, a veces eran estudiantes de doctorado los que queríamos conocer, doctorandos de otras universidades, etc. Este año no sé cómo lo vamos a hacer, todavía no nos lo hemos planteado, pero mi idea sería intentar volver a activar estos a pesar de la pandemia y hacerlos pues, semipresencialmente, como estamos haciendo esta sesión, por ejemplo. Y después tenemos un colegio de doctoral franco-alemán, que es una asociación de universidades españolas, francesas y alemanas que hacen un coloquio de doctorandos. Este coloquio tiene mucha tradición. Nosotros animamos a nuestros estudiantes a participar en él y, de hecho, este año se ha vuelto a poner en marcha en modo virtual. Entonces empezamos, creo recordar que era la semana pasada. La semana que viene tenemos otra presentación, entonces los doctorandos presentan con otros doctorandos y otros directores de tesis de estas 3 universidades su investigación en curso. Con todo esto y acabo, este PowerPoint, si no me equivoco, después se reparte a los estudiantes, por lo tanto he puesto el enlace aquí para que lo veáis de las 2 páginas web de los 2 grupos. Y con esto ya he acabado. Muchas gracias a todos. ¿Hay alguna pregunta? ¿Alguna duda, algún comentario? ¿No?
Yo tengo una pregunta práctica. La cuestión de los espacios,
Ujú.
que se ha mencionado, y uno puede imaginarse, ¿no?, que aquí hay un aula donde, por cierto, yo necesito... El doctor Sergi Torné es el decano de la Facultad de Traducción e Interpretación. Esta mañana nos ha abierto la sesión la profesora Ana Espunya, directora del departamento, pero el otro cargo relevante en una unidad de traducción y lingüística y ciencias del lenguaje es el decanato. A ver, quizá puedes también explicar la diferencia entre decanato y... Pero lo de los espacios, ¿no?
Lo de los espacios,
¿no?
sí. Intento responder a las dos cosas. Los espacios, como ha dicho antes Mercè Lorente, todos los grupos de investigación tienen un espacio que es el espacio del trabajo del grupo. Nosotros tenemos una sala, que es la sala de Infolex. De hecho, todos los espacios del IULA ocupan la tercera planta del edificio del estrecho. Cuando entráis a mano izquierda, el 54 es... 53, es 53, un decano tendría que saberlo, ¿no? Esto, el 53. Es que ahí no hay aulas, entonces el decano de eso no sabe. El 53. Entonces, hay una planta que es que tiene todos los espacios del IULA, hay un despacho, que es el despacho Infolex. Nuestros doctorandos pueden ir a trabajar a ese despacho. Los que tienen beca o algún tipo de financiación o un contrato o lo que sea, tienen mesa de trabajo y ordenador obligatoriamente. Los otros doctorandos, si tenemos espacio, les dejamos venir. Y de hecho, la mayoría de doctorandos pues, intentan reunirse entre ellos y quedan y hacen vida social para no sentirse aislados del grupo en la sala del grupo. Este año todo es más complicado y, por lo tanto, no tengo tan claro cómo va a ir durante el año porque los espacios compartidos son un problema. Entonces, no sabemos todavía mucho qué días van a estar ocupados los despachos y qué posibilidades de despacho hay para alguien que sea de fuera. Pero, bueno, si alguien viene al grupo ya lo hablaremos, que la gracia de estos grupos es que como al final nos conocemos todos, todo se puede hablar. Después, solo muy rápidamente me han preguntado la diferencia entre un decanato y una facultad. Esto requería una conferencia de varias horas. Muy resumida. Y departamento. Muy resumidamente, departamento y facultad. El decanato es el órgano de gestión de la facultad. Muy resumidamente, la facultad se ocupa de la docencia de grado y de todos los aspectos relacionados con la docencia de grado. Y, por lo tanto, de los planes de estudios, de los horarios, de las reservas de aulas, de los reconocimientos de créditos de los estudiantes, las convalidaciones, todas estas cosas, ¿vale? La facultad necesita profesorado y lo que hace es encargarle al departamento que contrate el profesorado. Y el departamento gestiona profesorado, la contratación de profesorado y la investigación. Entonces, el doctorado cuelga, para entendernos, del departamento porque la investigación forma parte del departamento. Las facultades no gestionan investigación, gestionan docencia. Solo docencia y suficiente hacemos, que es una locura. ¿Ya está? ¿Sí?
Yo creo que está magnífico, muchísimas gracias. Tenemos ahora 10 minutos de descanso de nuevo. Estiráis las piernas, salís. Lo habíamos pensado por el tema ventilación, pero realmente estamos ventilando mucho. Pero de todas formas hay 10 minutos y súper agradecidas. Sabemos ahora lo que es el IULA. Has dicho que está en el tercer piso. Sí. Despachos. Los profesores del libro los encontraréis en el pasador. Sí. Sí. Tiene la palabra el doctor Marcel Ortin del grupo TRILCAT.
Okay, thank you very much. Hope you are well. Sorry, yes. I'm going to talk about our research group, which is called TRILCAT, Grup d'Estudis de Traducció, Recepció i Literatura. Perhaps I'll have to... Sorry, can you just click on the web connection? Yes, on this website. Yeah, so this is our web page if you want to give a look at it. I'll just tell you that we work on mainly two fields, which probably you are familiar with. As our name indicates, Grup d'Estudis de Traducció, Recepció i Literatura Catalana, we focus on translation studies, and particularly descriptive translation studies and history of translation, and also on reception, mainly reception of foreign literatures in Catalan literature, but not only. We understand Catalan literature in a wide sense, comprising, for example, literature that is expressed in other languages but has connections with Catalan, etc. Literature from exile, for example, in Spanish, etc. So, for this presentation, you can give a look at our webpage if you are interested. I'll just say a few words about what we do, in what sense these two fields, descriptive translation studies and reception studies, might be interesting, or what's the reason for us to work in that field. So, Carmen, if you can go on the, sorry, on the PowerPoints. There are two PowerPoints. Yes. I can do it if you want. And the one on the left, yeah, with the presentation from the beginning, maybe. Sorry. Okay. So I can do it from here now. Thank you. So, translation studies. You might be already familiar with this, but I'll be very quick. As an academic discipline, this field was born when reflections on translation started on a systematic basis. So at the beginning, the reflection on translation accompanied the practice of translation. It was always culture-related. It had to do with what translators were doing in their cultural atmosphere and considering the status of the text. These reflections, as you probably know, go back to Cicero and Horace, Saint Jerome for Bible studies or Bible translation, etc. And it continues till the middle of the 20th century. These kind of reflections, which are really interesting for those of us who are interested in translation in particular. So this followed and connected with other disciplines like grammar and language learning, comparative literature, contrastive linguistics, etc. But then, from the mid-20th century, approximately, there was the emergence of the discipline proper as a field called translation studies. And this is where we are placed exactly in. These are some important books that were written on the subject. And then, in 1972, James Holmes, one of the first researchers on translation on a systematic basis, published this article, The Name and Nature of Translation Studies. And this, I'm going to focus on this just to be able to place our research on the general map of translation studies as Holmes conceived it in 1972. So this is the map, or this is the diagram, the general diagram. You might be already familiar with this. And Holmes stated that there were two kinds of translation studies, two main kinds of translation studies. And he called the first one pure, and the second one applied. Well, our research group is pure. It's pure just in the sense that it is not applied, not pure in any other sense. And not only pure, but also, I would say, descriptive, instead of theoretical, which would be the other possibility. And if we want to be more precise, we'll say that we research on translation from a descriptive point of view, and particularly with an orientation to the product, product-oriented studies. So what we are interested in is the study of translations themselves, of the products. Not as much on the process of translating, which involves psychology, linguistics, etc., not as much on function of translation. So, to summarize, descriptive translation studies, which belong to the pure side of them, oriented to the product, with a particular interest in the history of the products. Okay? The other side of translation studies, according to Holmes, would be the applied side, which includes training of translators, aids to translation, criticism, value judgments about translation, etc. So we belong, as I said, to the descriptive branch of pure research. And Holmes says that this branch constantly maintains the closest contact with the empirical phenomena under study. So we are working on historical objects on an empirical basis with, let's say, methods that are close to history of literature, comparative literature, empiric studies, historical empiric studies. I think I'll leave this here, and then we can move to the second PowerPoint, please. Yeah, if from desde el principi, if you can click there, Carmen. Up. Sí, és aquest, però on diu presentació de diapositives a dalt?
La vols en gran, sí.
Ara, gràcies. I've been explaining the descriptive translation studies side of our research, and as I said at the beginning, there is another side, which is it is closely connected to the first one, and it is reception studies. Reception studies is a discipline, literary reception studies in particular, is a discipline that was connected with comparative literature and was important already in the end of the 19th century, but particularly during the 20th century, and is still going on. If you are interested in what I will explain now, I suggest you can read a handbook, which is a classic in the discipline, Précis de littérature comparée by Yves Chevrel. What is literary reception studies about? Well, let's suppose that we take X and Y as variables that come into the study. For example, they can represent author, work, genre, national culture. Let's suppose this. In this, considering this, different possibilities for research in the field of literary reception studies would be, for example, X and Y. So, for example, an author and another author, and their connections. X in Y, for example, a classic author in a contemporary author, the influence. Fortune irradiation influence of X, an author, or a culture, a literature, a genre. Images, repercussions, echoes of Y in X, always considering these possibilities. And reactions, critical opinions, interests of Y. All these possibilities are included in the field of reception studies. So to show some instances of research, for example, these are real instances to illustrate what I've been saying. We could, for example, study a writer or a work as in possible, in fact, existing articles, an Addison borrowing from Molière, or Marià Manent, lector i traductor de John Keats. We could also focus on a cultural area or a work, Marivaux en Allemagne, reflet de son théâtre dans les miroirs allemands, or, for example, Dickens en la cultura catalana. Or involving several cultural areas related to a work, we could study Gogol en Russie et en France, essai de réception comparée, or Laiku and Josep Carné y Enrique Díaz-Canedo. And finally, for example, a receptor involving several works. We could study Orientation étrangère chez Balzac, Sur l'expressionnisme allemand et sa réception critique en France, Images of Spain in British Romanticism, or Sweden in European drama, etc., etc. I think with this, we can have a general idea of what we are working on. And I have no idea about your interests at the moment, but if any of you is interested in one of these fields, one of these approximations for research, you are welcome to contact me and to know what we are doing in the group, perhaps entering the group, etc. If you have any questions or comments, I'll be delighted to answer. In Spanish, English, Catalan. Okay, thank you very much.
I have a question, which is, so you have two main themes, translation and reception. Do you also combine them in the group?
That's a very good question. Thank you, Carmen. Yes, because as you probably have already seen in my presentation, translation is one of the main means of receiving an author, a literature in another literature. Of course, we all know this. This, as you know, used to be looked at by historians of literature, by professors, by academicians, as something of a second level. So, yes, we don't know Russian. I don't know Russian. I cannot read in Russian. So if I want to study Gogol, I have to use a translation. And this traditionally was considered as something inevitable, something that had to be done in this way, but not interesting in itself, a kind of renouncement. Since we cannot read the original, then we read the translation. Okay, let's do it. Now it's seen in a very different way. Now translations are considered important cultural products not only means for reading languages that we cannot read directly, and from this point of view, translation is probably the first, considered now the first way of reception, the first means of reception of a foreign literature in a different culture. Yeah, thank you very much.
There might even be a case where the translation may be considered more interesting, not better, than the original. Do you have an example? In Cassany? Oh, really?
Oh, yes. Well, this is very, this is...
We don't have too much time. Huh?
Okay, just 1 second. It's, of course, there is lots of argument about this, what you said. Because what is interesting? The question here is the word interesting, what does it really mean? In terms of purity, let's put it in this way, of course the original is the original and it cannot be replaced. But in other terms, in considering other factors, for example, the situation of a language in a particular moment, we can say that a Catalan translation of Shakespeare can be invaluable in a way, in the sense that it tells us lots of things about the situation of the language, the culture, the literary interests in that particular moment. And the same goes for, I don't know, the reception nowadays via translations of literatures that have been unknown till now, that have been unconsidered, ignored, such as you know, literatures from Africa, literatures from Asia, distant Eastern countries. So this is interesting in itself, apart from the existence of the original, of course.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, so...
Oh, okay, that's better, no? So this research group understands that the knowledge produced by contemporary societies, whether scientific, technical, or cultural, is articulated in the form of discourse. That is, it has language as a space for implementation. No one at present can imagine the construction of knowledge outside the new information and communication technologies. The possibility of quickly accessing an extraordinary amount of data by means of easily accessible terminals means that units of knowledge have to be translatable, either into processable units or into other languages and semiotic systems. Therefore, it seems plausible to state that the constitution of new knowledge is subject to the condition of translatability and communicability of knowledge, and that discourses are generated in which this knowledge is converted into products with market value. So, in plain English, this group is a joint venture, shall we say. It has a history of two research groups, one in discourse and translation and one purely in discourse. And we have united forces to create a group in discourse per se. Some of the researchers are very strong in discourse analysis without the translational component, and others are more interested in translation from a discourse analysis approach. That's a little bit the long and the short of that. Okay, so if you want to click on líneas de recerca, okay. Because we are a joint venture, there are many members, which I can show to you, but right now we also have then a fair amount of research areas where our various members are working in, and I'll go through them as quickly as possible. We have oral genre analysis,
and this is the interest of this one is the knowledge of oral discourse is fundamental for acquiring an awareness of speaking skills in different contexts and is based on conversational analysis and the ethnography of communication. Theoretical perspectives are worked on in order to analyze both monologic and dialogic discourses, different types of interactions, and specific features of verbal communication in different social contexts, and these are analyzed. Okay? Second one, political discourse. In this framework, we explore the situational dimension of discourse with a descriptive and interpretative purpose. The different genres of political discourse have a crucial importance in the construction of social meaning, the particular constraints to which they are subject, and the masking strategies usually employed by political professionals are a challenge for the analyst. The third one is discourse and popularization of science. Dissemination is a discursive practice that is developed in the relationship established between the scientific community and society in general through different media. The object of analysis focuses on the use of language in oral and written contexts. It studies the recontextualization necessary to transform scientific language into common language, specificity of explanatory discourse and its procedures. Fourth one, discourse and knowledge. Knowledge based on beliefs agreed upon by epistemic communities and the attribution of knowledge in discursive contexts. Cognitive theory focused on the typology of knowledge and the ways of managing it in textual construction. Okay. The next one, discourse and genre. The discursive construction of genre, starting with basic theoretical concepts such as Butler's performativity, Bourdieu's symbolic violence, and Foucault's ajustement. Subsequently, multimodal analytical protocols are developed for discourse analysis. Real interactions are recorded on video, focus groups, interviews, advertisements, films, written and oral documents are all worked on. One of the most common analytical activities is to observe the normative regulations imposed by the dominant discourses on bodies and interactions, and to detect discursive processes of social transformation. Six, yes. Discourse and social transformation, critical discourse analysis. This one studies how social transformation is discursively constructed at a time of crisis like the present, when citizens all over the world are organizing themselves against economic systems. One might call them market dictatorships. And they no longer feel represented by political institutions. New discourses emerge and give meaning to indignation and proposals for action. The purpose is to detect how these new discourses are constructed and what socio-cognitive transformations they entail. 7, multilingualism and diversity, sociolinguistic studies. The management of cultural and linguistic diversity is a key issue in a society that is more heterogeneous than ever and is constantly changing and evolving. From the theoretical concept of multiculturalism, we have moved on to those of interculturality and transculturality, where diversity is proposed as a new basis for development, creativity, innovation, and also for social cohesion, equity, and coexistence. Political discourses in urban environments as a unit of analysis. The goal is to analyze whether, beyond the rhetoric of diversity as a positive value, there is actually a concrete and effective management of urban environments. And 8, discourse pragmatics, contrastive corpus, and enunciative linguistics. The aim of this line of research is to analyze and describe the pragmatic, semantic, and grammatical features of lexical markers and idiomatic phraseological units, particularly those that have an epistemic value and or an evident value in various discursive genres. The approach is primarily contrastive, Catalan, Spanish, French, English, and German. The aim of the research is to observe the process of grammaticalization, behavior, and formal and functional differences, similarities of the language units analyzed in the process of elaboration and interpretation of a discourse in a given text genre. 9, translation of feigned orality. Feigned orality is the fiction or illusion of orality that a written text seeks to evoke through specific resources, i.e. resources that are typically considered oral. This line describes and compares the linguistic facts that characterize feigned orality in two languages, and also studies the translations that have been made of works that include fragments of feigned orality. 10. Translation studies of multimodal genres, namely audiovisual translation. Various phenomena to culture in different types of audiovisual translation, especially dubbing and subtitling, but also issues of accessibility, for example, subtitling for the deaf and hard of hearing, audio description, and others. And topics such as the translation of humor, the treatment of multilingualism within a film, and then how that's translated. The translation of disorderly language, scripted, which is, well, one of our PhD students did a PhD coining the term, which I think will be very successful. Disorderly language is defined as fictional, scripted language by speakers who are under the influence of drugs or alcohol, okay, and how that is portrayed, okay, as a different kind of language, okay, and also the translation of feigned orality. 11, we're getting near the end now. We have the lucky number 13, okay, right. So the translation and discursive approaches in legal economic translation. I think that one is self-explanatory. No? Legal translation based on methodological instruments of contrastive textual analysis and comparative law. The linguistic, cultural, and textual elements presented by these types of texts are analyzed in order to identify translation problems and propose possible solutions. Okay? And also work on corpus of texts as well. 12, last but one, appraisal and translation. In the framework of functional systemic linguistics, appraisal is a resource for communicating interpersonal meanings that show the willingness of the sender to establish a dialogue with the receiver, conditioned by the relations of power and solidarity between participants. This is a type of meaning that is characteristic of literary texts, but is not alien to legal or economic texts. In this line, we study the presence of valuation of appraisal and its treatment in two different fields, specifically legal, economic, and literary. We compare the translation strategies applied in each field. And last but not least, stylistics applied to literary translation. So you might get the feeling that this one might overlap a little bit with the, with the previous group. But in topics of translation, because of interdisciplinarity in translation studies, a certain amount of overlap is unavoidable. Okay, so some of our members are, shall we say, literary inclined, and hence this line. So the translation of linguistic, discursive, and narrative discourses that contribute to form the style of writers and achieve certain textual effects. Okay, I'll just give you a personal opinion now, which is I think that within translation studies, the division between literary and non-literary translation has not been a very useful one. At least in my experience of research, theory, and practice, the best findings of literary translation are of interest to non-literary translation and vice versa. And this is one of the positive aspects of discourse studies, because discourse is not very interested in this divide either. So an a priori division that this is literature, this is not literature, I think is harmful to translation studies, okay? Both regarding techniques, impact, reception, labor, all various aspects, okay? But as I say, that's me peddling my my own approach there. Okay, so we have 2 live projects. If you could click on Proyectos de Recerca. We have a rich history of projects, but at present we have 2 where it says vigents, 2 which are in progress and officially approved and being financed and kind of thing. The first one is called Frames y Narrativas de la Traducció y la Migració Europea, FANTAME, and this project aims to contribute to research. If you want to click on it, Carmen? Yeah, okay. For those who can read Catalan. If not, I'll read it in English.
Shall we use the Spanish interface?
Doesn't matter because I'll read it in English anyway.
But
Yeah.
that means it's going to...
Okay.
Because that will be more helpful to some.
Not a problem. This project aims to contribute to research in the role of translation as a control mechanism for different types of migration and in the study of discursive patterns and at the translinguistic level. The general research objectives are to identify frames of migration and translation in areas of migration contact in Spain and in Germany, and to investigate whether certain frames can be observed translinguistically along the corpus, which would imply the existence of identifiable transnational discursive patterns. And the other general research objective is to analyze how these frames affect the social narratives of migration and translation, and which ones can be identified in the discourse of agents working in migration contact zones and in the organization of translation in these zones. So while the media play a fundamental role in shaping discourses on migration and determining the frames that are used and perpetuated, much remains to be done to investigate how certain frames are introduced and established, and especially how this affects translinguistic and pan-European discourses. Approaches to the study of migration and its relationship to language are essential for understanding migratory processes within the European Union. Okay, and that's one project, and because I have 5 minutes, I'll move on to the next project, which is, the acronym is MUFITABI, which is a study of multilingualism scripted into fictional audiovisual series, and to see how these combinations of languages are dubbed or subtitled or otherwise audiovisually translated. Okay, so it's essentially a descriptive approach, just to see what happens, and then from an accumulation of data, then we hope to be able to show trends on how this translational problem is dealt with. Okay, traditionally, people think that, or have proposed that translation is an operation between 2 languages. You translate from language 1 to language 2. And this does not account for texts which have more than 1 language. Okay, so we need to enrich the theory, the proposal, to see what the practices are for translating texts. I don't know if you know, like a series like Narcos. Have you heard of Narcos, for example, which is manifestly bilingual? And then you have, what's the other one? Modern Family, all kinds of series and films where there is profuse combination of languages. So one of the, shall we say, myths of translation is that we translate monolingual, monodiscursive texts. Okay, and increasingly that is becoming the exception. Okay, so how to translate texts which include more than 1 language for narrative scripted purposes. We're not talking about sociolinguistic natural multilingualism. We're talking about fiction here, but anyway, the relation it might have. Okay, I am the main researcher in this project, and in the other project, Mario Bixiada and Maria Aguilar are the main researchers. Okay, you can visit this site. As you can see, it's very easy to get to. Once you get to Google, UPF GEDIT, and then you can okay? So I think like other presentations we've had this morning, we also organize seminars, and there is, we have a number of, I think as many as 11 PhD students already under supervision of one or other of us. So we try to keep active and bring in speakers and organize seminars. I would just recommend that if any of you are interested, we can also react to proposals or requests from the actual PhD students. Because sometimes we organize a seminar and maybe not many people come, so it's better to know what your interests are too, and then we can organize events around your interests. So that's all from me. Okay. Thank you. Any questions?
I have a quick question from what you said at the beginning.
Yeah.
You made a distinction between literary and non-literary.
Uh-huh.
And what do you include in non-literary translation?
No, well, I was saying against this division. Okay. So, for example, for many people, like non-literary would be scientific and technical texts, legal texts. But then when you get to television and cinema, where do you put that, for example? Okay, so I think there are texts, there are novels which are written by journalists, and they have an immense amount of fact and factual information in them. We have all this news which people are telling us is fake news. So the divide between fact and fiction is becoming more and more obvious, that it's a rather artificial divide. And sometimes you have to translate texts with disregard to whether they are factual or not. Okay, so sometimes what really matters is the actual discourse. Okay, how convincing they are. You can't be fact-checking all the time. So if the divide is fact or non-fact, we are in serious trouble today. And the other factor which might, shall we say, divide literature from non-literature would be quality of the language, quality of the writing. But again, I imagine you can have a concept of poor literature, bad novels, shall we say, and excellent scientific articles written in model language. So that one doesn't work too well either. But more specifically and more importantly, I would say that the key factor of whether to translate one way or another a text the key factor is not usually that it's literature or not, but it is the intention of the author, the message, the content, the style. There are so many other things. And the findings of literary translation, many of them are relevant to non-literary, I think, and vice versa. Okay, so I think in this sense, the burden of the proof is on the people who say that this divide is interesting. And I don't think they have provided sufficient evidence. Okay.
Thank you very much. Okay, another break to air the room. And we will be getting on the last slide. 2 more. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Okay. So, last lap, the penultimate presentation is by Dr. Daniel Cassany, who is the leading researcher in the GRAEL group, and the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm very happy to be here because it's my first face-to-face talk for 7 months. So great, yeah, to be here. And also, it's the first talk I will give with a mask, so I have really new feelings about this. And maybe it's also the first time I have to give a talk in this room, also for people who is here, but also for other people who is following us online. Yeah, so it's incredible. Okay. Okay, the purpose of this short presentation is just to introduce our group. You will find all the information of our group on the website. Yeah? You just have to look for GRAEL, G-R-A-E-L. This means Group de Recerca, Research, in Catalan also, and Aprenentatge, Learning, Ensenyament, Teaching of Languages. Yeah? And here you have all the information. We do research on teaching and learning languages, both in formal and in informal contexts. Okay? We have researchers from different backgrounds. For example, myself, I come from the Catalan philology, okay? But we have people that come from Spanish philology, from French philology, from German, from English, and so, okay? This is not an updated picture, as you can see here. And some of the PhD students are already gone, working in different universities, in China, for example, or in America also, and we have new ones, okay? This year we have, I think, 5 or 6 PhD students new that will begin the program this year, okay? And also we work with, we can use the English version for this. Do you prefer Spanish? But I have to talk in English, isn't it? Or what can I do? Okay, no problem. We understand all, yeah? And if not, you can write an email to me, yeah? Both you, if you are here, or online, okay? So here, okay, I was explaining the languages. We work with different languages. We are interested in a plurilingual and pluricultural context, teaching and learning, okay? So basically our most important languages are the local languages we talk here. This means Catalan, Spanish, basically, and also English and French and German, which are the languages that are touched here, and also sign language also, it's interesting. But we also work with languages that bring the researchers, yeah? So, for example, nowadays we have a researcher that is working with Spanish-speaking influencers in China, publishing posts in TikTok, for example, okay? And we did last year, for example, another research about how a Catalan teenager learns Korean because she loves BTS, the boy band from K-pop, do you know? Yeah. So it's not a problem. It's just a positive thing that we can add other languages, even if we don't understand or don't know these languages. But we have a very open or wide kind of interest about this, okay? Okay, let's see. Let's go to projectors, please. Can you help me for this? Okay, let's see what the kind of projects we have. Nowadays, we have 2 alive projects. The first one is this one. Please, Carmela, do click here. This is the project that I'm conducting nowadays, and it's about using videos for language learning and teaching, okay? Because we have done different projects before about fans, for example, fans doing different activities like, for example, fan dubbing, fan subbing, scanlation, working with otakus, with lovers or fans of manga and so on. And we discovered with this project that the most sophisticated teenagers usually prefer to work with videos. So this project is about how people learn languages using videos, producing videos, posting videos in the social networks,
and also commenting videos. Okay, this is the project that we have nowadays. Okay, and you can see all the information. This is an open access project. This means that we have to publish all the papers with open access. We spent a lot of money, you can believe it, a lot of money paying for this. And you will find all the information about papers and researchers here. Okay, let's go back, please. And I will show you the second project. Yes, this, no, it's not this one. Go back, please. And, okay, it's easier if, yes, sorry. No, because it's, oh. Okay, this is the second one. This is the project, the other project that is still alive for the last year. Okay, and this is ECODAL, and is assessing the discursive competence in different languages. Okay, this means that as we here in Catalonia, we have more or less 2 or 3 languages. This means Spanish, Catalan, and English also, because most of the learners at school, at regular school, learn English or even more another additional language. Or it happens also that some people that was born outside or has come here to live or to learn also, for example, brings Urdu or brings, I don't know, Italian or brings Arabic. Okay, so we have some important groups of people that are currently using 3 or 4 languages, okay? And this project investigates about if there is a general discursive competence in these languages in relation with genre, with textual genre, okay? So all the researchers of this group belong to one of these 2 projects, okay? And you are allowed to be enrolled in one of these or just to follow our activities, okay? We usually do a seminar monthly, and you are invited to join it, even if you have another interest or you have another researcher or you belong to another group, you can come to our group, okay? And we usually do, for example, we read a paper and we discuss it, a paper from other researchers related to these topics. Or we also, for example, discuss drafts from research papers from our researchers' information, okay? Or also we do data sessions. Yeah? For example, the last one was absolutely crazy and interesting. It's about a researcher we have from China who is studying how Chinese people here learn Catalan after learning, obviously, English and Spanish, and they decided to begin to learn Catalan. But as they are so technological and sophisticated, they use a lot of apps, translation apps, online dictionaries, terminological databases, and Ruo Sheng is doing a research about how people manage this kind of technology in order to solve the problems they have in using languages, in using Catalan. Yeah? And she usually do record screens of the boards, of the laptops, or the mobiles of the learners, okay? And she studies the kind of actions these people do in using these technological tools, okay? What else? What is more important? Okay, I can show you the faces of how my colleagues. We can go back. Yeah, I will introduce the paper, the people. Okay. Okay, here you have all the people, and I think all the people have a personal web page, or also you can find the profile in Google Scholar, for example, okay, if you are looking for a supervisor. or if you are looking for assessor in your topic, okay, you can check. It's what I will do in your position, okay, just to check if any of these people are doing a research that interests me, okay. Okay, most of the people belong to this department, to your department also, but we have also people from other departments of the university. For example, Jose Maria comes from humanities, okay? And also Chinko Chunchun comes from humanities. And we have also, for example, Silvia Llach is from the Girona University, from the Universitat de Girona, okay? But we all begin. Carmen Lopez is the main researcher for the second projects I introduced to you today, okay? You can have a look also to the thesis. Okay, vale. If you are interested in the kind of thesis we have already finished, here you have a list. It's not updated, I'm so sorry, but we have two theses from last July who are not yet here, okay? But for example, Maria Sanz has just won a prize for the best thesis in the field of Spanish second language teaching, okay? It's very nice research about using WhatsApp in the classroom or outside the classroom, or a group of WhatsApp for all the learners of a group, okay? And most of the theses are online, and you can check it, really, okay? And if I can answer any question now or online or whatever you want, or if you want to have a coffee, you are welcome.
So does this work? Can you check that it works, or?
We've been the whole morning.
All right.
It works.
Okay.
Trust me.
Okay. So thank you, Carmen, and thank you for coming. So my name is Wolfram Hinzen, and I'm glad to present you our group, which is in the context of the other research groups in the department, and we consider forming a research community across these groups as really very important for this presential events are also very important. Yeah? So we are emphasizing presential meetings a lot to the extent that they are possible at the moment. So if you, whenever you want to take part in our activities, you are more than welcome. So here is us. As you see, we are about 10, 11 people. Some couldn't come at this particular photo opportunity. I think I have around 8 PhD students at the moment and 1 or 2 postdocs. It's quite international. So we have 3 students from the US and 1 from Chile and 1 from Slovakia and 1 from China also. And this is our grant history. So we started in 2013, and we are now kind of recognized the research group of AGAUR. And we have this ministerial grants, 3 of them until now, and we had a British one before because I was based in the UK before coming here. So this is the kind of financial framework in which our research takes place. And what is very important to us, because of the clinical work we are doing, is a network. So we have basically spent years to build a clinical network with collaborators, without which we can essentially do nothing. So in particular, Fundación ACE is an Alzheimer foundation here in Barcelona who run a memory clinic from where we are recruiting people with prodromal Alzheimer's disease and also symptomatic patients with Alzheimer's. The Orienta Foundation is a center of attention for children with developmental disorders. The San Juan de Deu is a pediatric hospital of one of the best in Spain, I believe. And we do our neuroimaging there, and Valdebron, we do our aphasia research, and so on and so on. I should say in all of these cases, we have been fundamentally affected by the crisis, as you can imagine. So anything to do with hospitals, any research to do with hospitals has been basically stopped because it wasn't a priority for the hospitals. So we are basically at least half a year behind in most of the studies with these collaborators. So it's a really, really big problem at the moment, especially for PhD students who have to finish. So it's not an easy time for sure. So what do we do? What is our mission statement? Well, it's actually very simple. So we look at language as a system intrinsic to human cognitive functioning. So we think that when you function cognitively in a normal way, like right now, for example, you are listening, you are thinking, you have your own thoughts in the background, we think that to this kind of cognitive functioning, language functioning is intrinsic. So your language faculty has to function in order for you to think normally and to conceptualize the world. It's not that first your thinking happens and then language comes along later to communicate your thought. So it's not just an instrument of communication, but it's intrinsic to the configuration of your mentality. Now that makes a prediction, namely that when cognitive functioning is disturbed, which it is in mental disorders, language functioning should be disturbed as well. So if language is intrinsic to cognition, then if cognition is disturbed, language should be disturbed. So that's a very simple and very broad prediction. And effectively, this is what we have been studying, going from one clinical population to another clinical population with mental disorders. And we have found in every single case that you see alterations in language processing of a fundamental kind. Yeah? We have never found no differences. So the study domain where we test this broad prediction has been Huntington's disease, which is an early dementia that catches you if you have the relevant gene in your early 40s and kills you within 10 years and leads to erratic body movements that you can't control. Alzheimer's disease you probably know, and then we have looked a lot on schizophrenia spectrum disorders, autism, Williams syndrome, acquired aphasia, and more recently, rare developmental disorders. For example, Coffin-Siri syndrome, Phelan-McDermid syndrome, that have the implication that language in these children does not properly develop. In some cases, does not develop at all, neither in production nor in comprehension. And evidently, it's a fundamental question what your thinking, what your cognition can be like when language has not developed in your childhood. All of this research takes place within a theoretical framework, which I have developed from around 10 years ago, which is called Uncartesian linguistics, and it's mostly represented in this book and in two previous ones. And that book in second edition is 2015, and I have to say that since then, I don't really have done any new theoretical work. So my thinking on this is kind of old, but I simply haven't had the time, and most of the initiative really has been to get experimental support for this theoretical hypothesis on the relation between thinking and language. Outreach has been extremely important to us. It has been intrinsic to all of our projects. And the biggest project we have had is the Talking Brains project, which is now a little bit dated. So it was in Cosmo Caixa, an exhibition on language in the brain, what makes us linguistic. It was for 1 year in Cosmo Caixa, and then it moved to Valencia. I think right now it is in Valencia, and will then move to Sevilla. And it was supposed to move around the world, but that's not clear at the moment whether this is still happening. So this was a way of creating a window to the world for our research, advertising linguistics as a science. So for the rest of the talk, basically, I have just a couple of examples, because if you want to know what we do, I think the best is just to tell you about some sample results we have had in different clinical populations. So the first example comes from Huntington's disease patients. And as I told you, these are people who are gene carriers. You can identify them at any time in their lives as carrying the Huntington gene. But they live completely normal lives until the disease becomes symptomatic. So it is very important to actually find a detector from when onwards the disease actually shows its effects. And we have been hypothesizing that in this so-called prodromal phase of the disease, you could have linguistic markers. Why? Because of the basic hypothesis. Yeah? The moment your cognition declines, which is what happens in dementia, our hypothesis would predict that language should be a marker of that. Yeah? And so we looked at domains of linguistic organization. Is it okay? Like sentence connectivity, for example. So how clauses are combined via coordination, subordination, and so on. And we see that if you look at controls pre-HD, pre-Huntington, so prodromal patients who are not symptomatic yet in a clinical sense, you see that there's a nice upward trajectory in most variables. And interestingly, if you compare the controls to the prodromal patients, you already see linguistic differences, yeah, in the way that language is structurally organized. And the important thing here is to remember that these pre-symptomatic patients are completely normal people who live normal lives and have jobs and so on. Yeah? So it's quite remarkable, I think, that you can see language catching or reflecting the disease when it's still preclinical. Second example is from schizophrenia. And there's a special symptom called formal thought disorder, which is actually clinically manifest and tested through disorganized speech. But linguists have not really looked at this very much, and we hypothesized that 10 variables that you see here would be distinguishing a formal thought disorder group from a schizophrenia group without formal thought disorder and from controls. Okay? And of these 10 variables, it turned out that only 4 were actually significant. And that's a fairy tale telling task. So patients simply talk, and we annotate linguistic variables. For example, definite noun phrases, so anomalies in definite noun phrases, in indefinite noun phrases, or in pronouns, for example. And it turned out that you see special vulnerability in patients with formal thought disorder in definite noun phrases and in pronouns. In other words, in a specific form of reference, which I have argued in my linguistic work, is inherently grammatical in nature. So there's a problem with reference to the world the moment it is mediated by certain grammatical configurations. Yeah, so there's a grammatical marker in the way you handle your language capacity, the way you use it referentially, which shows in specific linguistic variables. And definiteness is a specific area of interest if it comes to schizophrenic speech. Now, going beyond there, we have a recent imaging study where we looked at deictic processing. Now, what is deictic processing? Basically, patients were lying in the scanner and they were listening to 2 types of conditions, linguistic stimuli in both cases. In the one case, they listened to 2 people talking about worldly events without ever using first or second grammatical person, I and you. So imagine a newsreader on TV who describes what happened yesterday or today when the king visited the judges or whatever it was. Yeah? You don't have to use any second and first person for that. And then in the second condition, that was exactly what they did. So they talked about the same event, but they talked to each other asking you, what do you think of that? And sometimes they would even address the person in the scanner. Yeah? What do you, who are in the scanner, what do you think about that? Okay, so it's basically a study of high versus low deixis, where high deixis simply means use of all grammatical persons, and low means only the third person. And interestingly, in controls, you see magnificent differences in core language areas when you subtract the activations for low from the activations for high. So these are the activations that are specific to high when you ignore those for low. Okay? And then we have the same in schizophrenia patients, and the broad pattern looks quite similar. But if you compare the two groups, if you look what is more activated in controls and in schizophrenia patients, you see a couple of areas where there are differences. So there is a difference in the processing of I and U that you see at the level of the brain in schizophrenia patients. And that has all kinds of implications for self-processing, because first person relates to self, and dialogical competence, and inter-social communication, and so on and so on. I'm probably running out of time very soon. So I have two more examples, I think. So stop me when I should stop, right? Okay, so here's example 4. So we are very interested in autism. And why is that? Because language problems in autism are very prominent. So there's language delays in autistic kids in, I think, over 50% of cases. And in around 30% of children with autism, language does not develop. And what I mean by this is not that these kids don't talk. For some reason, they decide not to talk. Rather, they do not have a language capacity. This you see also in their comprehension, for example. So if it was just a problem with speech, their comprehension should be intact. But in fact, comprehension and production are both fundamentally affected in these kids. So we are interested in the brain basis of that, and this is an example of a tractography study. So this is the language connectome. It's the network of white matter connections between the core language areas, in particular these posterior temporal areas where Wernicke's area is located, and the inferior frontal areas where Broca's area is connected. So it's kind of this shell shape. And we were specifically interested in the arcuate fasciculus, which is this red-yellow tract. And we see a difference in these kids in laterality. So in the integrity of this tract, but in terms of laterality. So whether it is has more integrity on the left or on the right. In U, for example, it has more integrity on the left, because we know that the brain is left asymmetrical in language respects, and that's an example of that. Now in these kids, so below 0 means right lateralized, so quite consistently these kids are right lateralized in the arcuate fasciculus. And in another tract, which is ventral, the E4, inferior frontal occipital fasciculus, we see the opposite pattern. So in you guys, this tract is normally either non-lateralized or left or right lateralized, but in this case we see a left lateralization. And that is also very interesting here. This is about the myelin content in these nerve cells. So myelin is a protecting sheath around the nerve cells, which allows the nerve cells to communicate better. It's for information flow, okay? And normally, myelin increases until the age of 33. So you are all in good shape. Yeah? In your case, it's still on the rise. In my case, and I'm afraid, Carmen, in your case, it's going down. Yeah? And in these kids, what we see is that it's actually, with age, it's actually going down. Yeah? We had a group from 8 to 17, and the myelin in this group actually goes down with age. So there's a myelin problem. And that is very important for us because myelin is a medical treatment target. So for example, in multiple sclerosis, there's also a myelin problem. So it is kind of not impossible to think that loss of myelin is something you could medically treat. Yeah? I mean, that's music of the future, but it's not completely absurd as an idea.
Yeah, I think that more or less we should be wrapping up.
Right, okay. So what else do I have? Well, something on the syndromic kits on functional connectivity. It's about how regions are connected to each other in the brain. But the only thing I will say about this, and then I will stop. So this is an ASD kit. This is a child with intellectual disability of unknown origin. This is a Coffin series child, a Landau-Kleffner syndrome child, and this is a Fragile X child. And this is the connectivity of Heschel's gyrus, which is in auditory cortex, what is activated when you perceive language auditorily. It's the connectivity of that across the two hemispheres. So whenever you see activation in Heschel's gyrus on the left, you see it on the right. So this is fundamental into functional MRI. And here, the overall connectivity tends to be very low in these kids in auditory cortex. And in this particular child, which is the most severely affected, it's actually negative. So it's negatively correlated, the two sides. This is almost like in an orchestra where the first violin plays Beethoven and the second violin plays Stravinsky. Yeah? And of course, such a child cannot acquire language. Yeah? So functional connectivity, we think, is very important to detect differences in how these kids function. So that's just a couple of examples, and we are interested in linguistic theory as well, so you don't have to be interested in that to talk to us, so talk to us for any reasons you may have.
Thank you very much. I'm sure this has been like the best way to end, isn't it? With a very cutting-edge kind of research with brain studies and neurological experimental research. We've been very sort of short in time. There were many questions at all. I don't know whether you have a pressing question, otherwise Dr. Hinzen, as you've heard, will be very happy to hear from you and to respond to any knockings on their doors. I mean, you have a website where they can contact you, or otherwise on the UPF University staff list. I mean, you are accessible. Okay. So thanks a lot. And we are sort of giving a few closing remarks together with your tutor. Mercè, would you like to come to the floor? And Maximilian, as usual, this was very interesting. Okay. So perhaps rounding up, you've seen things that maybe at 9 o'clock in the morning and you've heard you didn't expect to hear, right? The variety of themes that are dealt with and the variety of approaches to the themes and the data that we use to conduct research on them is very extraordinary. You don't get this in many departments, by the way, because departments tend to be much more focused, well, not so rich. And it has to do with the fact that we started as a translation department, and then translation is already with different languages, with different texts, and language and acquisition. So there's a little bit of history. Some of the most cutting-edge research groups, like this one, is relatively new in the department, right? So there's more conventional research and more cutting-edge. But the message is clear. Everyone would love to have you. Oh, yes. Everyone would love to have you knock on their doors and definitely talk to you and attend their training sessions, whatever they are. Okay? I don't know whether you have any question. I was talking about the fact that you would get all this information concerning different events through email, that in the current circumstances, quite a few of these events may be online. So for everyone who is on stream, you will be able to access those events. Not all of them, but I guess many. In fact, this is the only room in the entire campus that you can get a streaming recording on stream. So, you know, the availability of...
There is
Another one.
Another one.
Okay, there's another one. But perhaps not with so many chairs.
Yes.
Exactly, so a smaller one.
Small.
Anyway, we were talking about rooms, spaces, and then we were discussing with Mercè that on your first seminar, she will take you around campus so that you see everywhere that has been mentioned here, so the different offices for the different groups. Someone was asking about rooms for students. The library has a special room for graduate students, and rather than master students, doctoral students. So it's very easy. You just get to the counter at the library and you ask for that room. It's open, and it's got access to Wi-Fi. You can sort of plug your computers there. So you're welcome to use that room. And then anybody with you know, close contact with supervisors in the different groups, where there are rooms, just ask for, you know, is there a place where I can be? Yeah? This is something that is a bit beyond my own reach, but do ask. Okay? So thanks very much for your interest, and I don't have anything to say other than thank you, and we will be seeing you around, and good luck.
Bueno, simplemente una palabra de agradecimiento a todos los que también nos ven desde lejos. Muchas gracias por la larga jornada. Yo creo que es interesante tener una panorámica de todo. La semana que viene, el viernes por la tarde, tenemos el próximo seminario. Son cuestiones administrativas, pero yo creo que no solo administrativas, sino que intentaremos ampliar lo que podamos de lo que hemos hablado hoy sobre espacios, la universidad, para que todo el mundo que ya esté aquí o aún tiene que venir se sienta cómodo y sepa moverse bien. He pensado que esta primera la podemos hacer cuestiones administrativas en línea, por tanto, os conectaré ya esta semana y ya os diré en qué Zoom o en qué Meet nos vamos a encontrar todos. En cambio, la otra semana, que vamos a hablar del contexto, en vez de estar en una aula, si hace buen tiempo, podemos buscar un espacio más amplio y hablaremos de Barcelona, de lo que os ofrece también como ciudad, de lo que queráis vosotros, del país, de las cuestiones lingüísticas y lo que queráis. Por tanto, estamos organizando también esa jornada de seminario. Y ese día podemos hacer el tour, incluso llegar a la playa si hace buen tiempo. Es decir, que lo que se trata es que nos sentamos cómodos en el programa de doctorado en todos los sentidos, no solo en el de la investigación, sino el vital también, ¿no? Aunque tengamos estas circunstancias tan extrañas.
Sí. Yo solo quiero decir quizá otra cosa. Nos gustaría que escogierais un delegado o delegada de curso. Cuando os conozcáis mejor, sería una liaising person para que cualquier tema que os preocupara o que quisierais sugerir, se lo pudierais explicar a Mercè como representante. Es decir, we would like you to choose a group representative to liaise with general matters, of course. Nothing to do with individual matters, general matters, with your tutor.
De hecho, en la asamblea o en el consejo de departamento hay siempre una plaza, me parece, o una o dos de representantes del programa de doctorado. Entonces está bien que uno sea de un programa avanzado, porque tienen unas problemáticas, pero alguien sea también de programas acabados de llegar, ¿no? Personas de años, ¿no? Del primer año o del segundo año como máximo. Esto ya os anunciaremos cuando haya elecciones y todo esto, pero bueno, aunque aún no haya elecciones, al menos tener una persona de contacto. De todas maneras, conmigo, o en pantalla o presencialmente, una vez a la semana seguro que podremos estar y yo estoy a vuestra disposición. No diré las 24 horas del día, pero 5 días a la semana seguro.
El convenio de los trabajadores quiere. Okay, so